Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I am ready. If you'd like to call us back to order, perhaps we should resume.
Yes, indeed. Honorable colleagues, thank you for being with us this evening. Thank you to all the other colleagues that's on the meeting that are not part of the Finance Committee. Thank you for being here. We will now go into item 2 on our agenda, which starts the departmental workshops. The first city department on our list is the City Town Clerk's Office.
Madam Chair, this is Alder Adam Marchand. Might I give a couple of procedural reminders while we promote?
Yes, indeed. Go right ahead.
Madam Chair, so I just wanted to remind colleagues, I also see that Alder Hunt Smith is with us. Welcome.
Oh, good evening, Alder Smith.
I want to remind colleagues about how we will proceed. Have multiple departments to go through tonight. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We are going to stick to the procedure that we've had for a year now, which is, Madam, when it's time to allow colleagues to ask questions of department heads, city staff, Madam Chair will go through the roster of our committee in the way that she did the votes. Each colleague given up to 4 questions, some really good questions. Given the time factor, we will not be going around a second time. So make sure that those 4 questions are indeed ones you wish to ask. Your best, most important question. Of course, someone asks the questions you wish to ask, you can certainly ask to the next colleague. We are, the mayor posed 2 different budgets, different scenarios, really looking at one set of information this evening. The default is the moving forward together budget. There may be certain items that a staff member might say could be vulnerable if revenue assumptions are not met. I just wanted to let public know and colleagues know that we're not looking at 2 different sets of paperwork. It's really one budget proposal, one baseline that is the basis of the questions and the dialogue this evening. And given that we have quite a bit to go through, we would please ask colleagues to stick to the budget that's before us. The chair will exercise discretion on lines of questioning that start to depart from the matter at hand. Of course, if it becomes clear that we need to have some kind of departmental workshop on an issue in the future, that's something we could consider, but we do ask colleagues to stay within the scope of our meeting tonight, which is to understand the proposed budgets for these departments for next fiscal year. With that, I hand it back to Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. And I see that our town clerk, Honorable Michael Smart, is with us. And we'll start with you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Honorable Alders. Michael Smart, 1 Lion Street.
Alders, your voice sounds kind of you're having a little connection issue.
Is that better?
Start again.
Michael Smart, 1 Lion Street.
Your communication, your voice, your connection have a.
How about now?
No.
Is that better?
Nope. Try again.
You hear me now?
Not really, no.
Mr. City Clerk, if you can have them call, we can get your audio from your phone.
Cell phone?
Someone can call from cell phone, yes.
Give me 1 sec.
No problem.
Take your time.
Okay.
Maybe you can mute the audio from your computer.
If that's done, go ahead. You're in.
Mr. Lucas, we don't hear him.
I wonder if his cell phone
Star
is muted.
6. You'll need to star 6 on your
Yep.
phone. Okay, you're
Can you
good.
hear
Yes.
So sorry.
Yeah, turn off your speakers if you can.
Okay, how's that?
Great.
Is that better?
Yes. Wonderful.
Okay.
Good
So
evening.
sorry, Madam Chair. Good
No
evening.
problem. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, Michael Smart, 1 Lion Street.
Maybe Gardner, 13 Bay Street.
And Michael Gormany. Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut.
Go right ahead, folks.
Madam Chair, if Mr. Lucas can give me share screen.
Hang on. You're good to go?
All right.
Should work now.
All right, let me just pull it up here. All right, I believe, can everyone see the city clerk one?
Snell changes.
We see your presentation, Mr. Gormany. Budget
All
overview.
right, I'm sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties on my end. All right, thank you, Finance Committee. We are here together for another budget cycle, another year, in going through the departments. So this year with the format, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start out most of the city departments and then sort of turn it over to them for to give their presentation. Again, as Vice Chair Marchand mentioned, this year there were 2 budgetary proposals. Again, the mayor is focusing on the Forward Together budget, which has additional revenue coming from the state and Yale and other budgetary adjustments. So we will get into that probably a little bit more in the finance presentation. But right now, what you have in front of you is Mr. Smart and Ms. Reed for the city clerk. So in looking at their budget for fiscal year 22, the proposal from the mayor is $508,454. The 2 changes in his budget are really on the personnel side and the non-personnel side. On the non-personnel side, you see a contractual service cut of $15,000. That was based on the $2 million cut within this fiscal year that was budgeted by the board when the FY21 budget was passed. The second change is in personnel. We are taking one of his positions which is a land record specialist, and changing that title to an election land record specialist. That is being done for more efficiency in operations and due to what Mr. Smart seen in the recent elections and how we can get the most out of our personnel. So with the title change, you know, Mr. Smart, Ms. Reed believes that will bring more efficiencies to the operations of his department. So what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Mr. Smart and Ms. Reed to sort of give an overview of their department.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you, Michael. Thank you. I would just want to just start out by saying, I mean, last year was a very, very busy year for the clerk's office. Very exciting
Mr.
year.
Smart, I don't mean to interrupt. This is Alder Adam Marchand. Mr. Gormany loved the pictures of the martial artists in your family, but maybe you need to screen share anymore.
Say that one more time. I'm sorry.
This is for Mr. Gormany. We still see his screen.
The
which
shared
is-
screen.
It's a
still on.
beautiful picture, but I'm not sure he needs us to see it at this time.
I think that's one of my backgrounds, Alder Marchand. Let me take a look at that.
Very nice. Thank you.
Sorry for that interruption, Mr. Smart.
Okay, no worries. The election year last year was a very, very busy year, unprecedented year for the town clerk's office. You know, we did more absentees. We actually, about over 16,000 people applied for absentees. We produced over 14,000. You know, this was in a highly COVID environment. We've worked since, you know, the COVID pandemic. Our office has been open, operating full-time. We have our black box downstairs where folks bring in their documents, they drop them off. We process them, we certify them, we send them back via mail. We're still, you know, posting notices. A lot of our work is actually that we have to do is process inside the office. So we're continuing to do that work and learn how to continue to serve, you know, better serve the public in the environment where, you know, folks are not coming in the office, but we're interacting. You know, we're taking some folks in the office by appointment, and depending on the title searches and, you know, the urgency of what's going on with title searches. The election for this year, as you know, we have a municipal election. The alders, the mayor, city clerk, board of ed this year. So we look for a busy year. Again, obviously not as busy as last year, but we're going to continue the same trend. Waiting for word back from the state of Connecticut as to what they're going to do as far as you know, additional funding. You know, we hope to continue to utilize the ballot boxes that we have outside in the that we promoted that worked very, very good. Certainly, a lot of folks voted absentee, so we'll see what the legislative body comes up with up in Hartford. And any new implementation of different laws that we have to adhere to. We're working with the Clerks Association. We're going to, you know, work with our budget. Certainly, if there's any changes to it, you know, we will, you know, address that with obviously the Honorable Board of Alders and Finance Committee. You know, our staff works very hard. Assistant Clerk May Reed is really backbone here, who really, you know, mans the machine, really, you know, make sure that we stay out of trouble, and, you know, we work hard and we make sure that we're efficient. The change Mike Gormley talked about as far as the efficiency in the office is really has to do with compliance and making sure that, you know, we're hitting our deadlines, we're in compliance with the state, and we're making sure that we're getting our records together and keeping us on top of, the duties that we have to do. It's a very, very detailed operation that, we take seriously, and we're going to continue to serve the public. Certainly, alders come in, they have concerns or constituent issues. We're here to address them, and we'll go from there. And at this point, I'm going to let May say a few words. And May just brought out that other departments also, as far as any requests that we may have. We deal with it. With that, I'll be more than happy. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions from the alders.
Okay, thank you very much. And we will start with the questions from Alder Marchand.
Madam Chair, thank you, Mr. Mark, for your presentation, and you too, Mr. Harmony. I just have two questions. One is in regards to the position change. I see that from the title, at least, it seems to be someone who can handle both land records requests and election-related work, and so it entails an increase in salary. I assume that means this person has to have more training and experience, and maybe is at a high labor grade or something. And so I'm just trying to understand how having that change in title for this vacant position will help you. I assume the vacant position will help you in the office. And my second question is, I said there's a reduction in your budget from last year. I assume that's because of the extra money needed to deal with the presidential election. Do you feel like the reduced amount from last year that is proposed for this year will be adequate to meet the needs that you will face in this municipal election year? Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty, go ahead,
So
Mr.
the title change position, that person is currently in that position. So it's not a new body coming in. So certainly any duties, the change in duties, they would be able to handle. Actually, they have been handling those duties. So we don't see any difference coming from that. That shouldn't be, that I don't see an issue with that at all. I think it's more just, make sure we're on top of operations, job descriptions are intact, and, we're, more efficient. As far as the difference in the salary change from the dollar reduction amount from last year. We're gonna do the best we could do. We hope for the best. If there are any issues, certainly with funding or additional money, we will, certainly address that with the alders and the finance committee. But we're gonna just do the best we can do with that, our budget, as we always do.
Yes, you do.
I would just like to add to what Michael said, is that we have so many bodies here. We have 3 full-time, myself included, and the clerk. But under contract, we all have to, they all have to have their time off, their vacation, and whatever else happens. Unforeseeable things come up with the children, family emergencies and what have you. And still, we are still addressing our COVID issues. So sometimes the extra body would help,
So I think I know who was speaking, but please don't give us your name and address record.
Well,
Your name and address.
Your name and address.
Mamie Gardner, Assistant City Clerk, 13 May Street.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gardner.
So then the the title change is more a recognition of additional duty and expertise that that person already has, and you're bringing the title and classification in line with the reality.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Smart, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marchand. Next on our list, Ms. Ernie Santiago is not on the call. Alder DeCola, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
Thank you. Alder Morrison, any questions for the town clerk? Alder Morrison?
I don't think she's here.
I'm
at the moment. Oh,
sorry.
there she is.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I was having some technical difficulties. No, I have no questions. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, ma'am. Alder Walker Myers, any questions for the town clerk?
No questions, Madam Chair. My question was already asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Festa?
Hi, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. Just curious because we do have an election this year and how, if we are allowed to vote absentee again, how will that impact the staffing and how many temp workers will you need, if any? I'm thinking maybe fewer because it's municipal versus what we went through last year, but if you could just clarify that. Thank you.
Yeah, so of course it would be fewer. It, you know, a lot of that depends on, you know, we kind of look at that probably as we get closer to July or late June with the filings of folks when they start to file for office, and then we know they're going to be a primary. And at that point, then we can kind of figure out what we need as far as staff for the primary, and then leading into the general election, because we'll be taking nominating petitions also. So once we get that, then we can gauge. But usually, I mean, it would be nothing like it was for the presidential, but you know, we usually bring, you know, a few bodies in to make sure that we're on top of, because obviously it's going to be, we're going to do more absentees than we've done in the municipal election also. So, you know, that's how we gauge it, but pretty much the same operation and, you know, the same decision-making we've made. As much information we get, we can go by and, you know, make a determination.
Okay, and all of that is budgeted for any of the extra?
Right. So we have a full-time. We have money in a line item for our full-time help, part-time help, and then, you know, we have some overtime money. So.
Okay. And the last temporary workers were employed until, is it correct, until the end of January? And were you able to get everything done in that time frame?
Yes, that was very helpful. We were able to get that stuff done. It was a lot of work that we had to do after the election, which, you know, we knew we had to do. So that was very helpful, and it was really, it was essential. Just, you know, the volume and the workload. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for all your work in your office, to you and to May and the staff. Madam Chair, I'm all set. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Moving right along, Alder Furlow, do you have questions for the town clerk?
No questions, Madam Chair. Appreciate all the work that the city town clerk's office does. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez?
No questions, Madam Chair. And I also appreciate the work that the city town clerk's office does. Thank you, Mr. Smart.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you. Alder Hurt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I have no questions, but I do want to comment and agree. Also agree with my colleagues who are saying that the work that you are doing, Mr. Smart, you're doing a phenomenal job. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. And last but not least, Alder Decker.
I have no questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Town Clerk Smart. And the office. We're grateful for your service. Thank you.
Madam Chair. And thank you all for your support.
Yes. Moving right along to the mayor's office, Mr. Gorman, you're driving the ship today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe Mr. Madison is in the attendee, and he has the presentation for the mayor's office, so he'll need share screen.
Okay. Hey, good evening, Mr. Matson.
And I would just, sorry, Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut.
And good evening to you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. I'm Sean Madison, 1279 Quinnipiac Avenue in the hard-hitting 12th Ward. Appreciate the time tonight. And I think if City Engineer Giovanni Zen, I believe, is in there, if he could get pulled over, he'll be part of the part of this tonight to talk about the Capitol. In addition, if I could get share screen, which I think I have. Now, the one thing I have to say is I don't have any really cool martial arts pictures to share. I didn't know we were supposed to do that tonight, and I apologize I didn't have any ready. I will endeavor. Okay. So the office of the mayor is accountable to the people of the city of New Haven and accepts and administers executive responsibility over aspects of city government, including city.
I'm sorry, Sean. I'm sorry to interrupt. We lost share screen for you, I believe.
Okay.
It was working.
It was working.
It was.
You guys have it?
Yes.
Yes.
Right. So we wind up administering executive responsibility in local government, including city departments, bureaus, agencies, commissions. We cause laws and ordinances to be executed and enforced. We ensure that all contracts and agreements with the city are faithfully kept and performed. And we exercise other executive and administrative duties and powers conferred upon chief elected officials by virtue of state law. What is different from last year's allocation from the Board of Alders was $954,196. We are requesting this year $936,825. We do not have any position changes and no changes in salary figures. What we did is we eliminated business travel out of the budget, and we've reduced other contractual services. This is the result in the change between last year and the requested for this year. In general, on the budget overview, we'll talk about the capital project in just a moment. A couple notes on the special fund. One is under the Office of Development and Policy, the grant writer and policy coordinator. Another is under Office of Diversity is the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. And then finally is the Office of Sustainability and a Sustainability Specialist and Analyst. Michael, would you like to talk about the grant writer and policy coordinator?
Sure. The grant writer and policy coordinators basically replaces the Director of Office of Development and Policy. That position is funded through a series of grants that we currently have, such as CDBG, ESG, and some of our other larger grants. What this person will do once we hire he or she is what you sort of see on the Board of Ed side. Someone that can deal with and work on grants and apply for grants. So that person would work in the Office of Management and Budget along with the budget director. But that is the funding for that position is basically made up of different grants that we currently have within the city. And again, that person would work on those grants, but also work on applying for and researching grants for the city of New Haven.
And just as a note on these special funds, again, these are not, for folks at home, these are not general fund dollars. These are usually driven by specific grants and or philanthropic dollars. Many times these positions are listed and called out in the budget, but it does take some time to identify the proper funding sources, and sometimes we are not successful within that same fiscal year of obtaining a grant or philanthropic dollars to fund the position. So
correct. So I'm sorry, Mr. Madison. So the error that was in the budget is one of the positions was overwritten. As Mr. Madison mentioned, we like to call out the positions in the budget. So the Office of Sustainability position, which Mr. Madison will talk about in the next slide, was actually omitted in the current budget. So when the Board of Alder approved budget is submitted in the grant section, you will see 3 positions instead of 2 of what it currently lists now.
Thank you. And we apologize for that correction. Michael was practicing some martial arts when he was typing it up. The sustainability specialist and analyst. This position will work with city departments, specifically on the climate emergency. It's going to work on some efficiency around emissions reductions in city operations, community programs, and clean energy, green workforce development initiatives, and work on some waste management. A lot of the role of this job will be working with constituency groups, community groups, and building coalitions to achieve these environmental justice objectives. Again, we will be working to fund this through seeking out grants and philanthropic dollars to fund the position. The Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. In December, the Racism as a Public Health Issue Working Group called for the creation of a position to support the revamped Affirmative Action Committee. The request was for the position to be titled Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. It was further requested by the working group that it be funded at a level to ensure that they're able to attract a highly qualified candidate. And again, this will be a special fund, so we'll be looking for grants, or philanthropic dollars to fund this position as requested by the working group. In addition to this, the office has been working very closely with Adrian Jefferson out on our alignment with the Government Alliance on Racial Equity, or GARE, which is something that we are beginning to work on with city departments. And it's largely and GARE is a national network of local governments that come together to work towards racial equity and advance opportunities for all. So this is something that we are programmatically and systemically trying to work throughout government and to ingrain within the bureaucracy on all levels of equity and diversity and inclusion. Then on the capital end, we have a request for $1 million. And for this, Giovanni, would you like to talk a little bit about the capital request?
Sure. Thank you all for having me here tonight. Giovanni Zinn, City Engineer, 95 Soundview Terrace. The request you see in front of you is for $1 million out of the capital budget. here in the pandemic, we've all seen the importance of broadband, high quality broadband connections. We estimate that 37% of households in New Haven do not have a high quality wired connection to the internet. That's one that meets the federal definition of broadband now, which is a rather small 25 down, 3 up connection. We really see, especially with remote learning and remote work, that we need a much higher upload connection in particular and throughput in general. Optical fiber is the best technology, not only in terms of its current data capacity, but also space for growth. And we find that municipal fiber internet access is typically much more affordable for residents. So there is some fiber, for example, available in the city from private providers, but that's in limited neighborhoods. And we do not believe that there are current plans for expansion in New Haven necessarily in the foreseeable future. So the $1 million request provides seed money to show how serious New Haven is about municipal broadband. We're looking at various different models for the program, both sort of a straight municipal model, public-private partnerships, partnerships also with outside philanthropic entities and other levels of government. So we look to do a lot of the design engineering around the system, also looking at a pilot installation with these funds, which will be used also in conjunction with other investments from outside sources. So that is, I think, a very lofty aspirational goal to have this citywide network, but is one that is as basic at the end of the day as having electricity, water, and the other basic utilities that we have. So we look forward to working on this.
Madam Chair, this is Alder Adam Shand. Sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. I just want to recognize our colleague Alder Santiago, member of the committee, who was this.
And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor, perhaps screen share and we can see the face.
Yeah, if we could
I'm sorry. Yep.
take down the shared screen now. Thank you very much. All righty, and this time we'll start with questions from Alder Marchand to the mayor's office.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the steps the staff took to reduce the travel budget from the mayor's office. I see that it's a small reduction from last year's budget. I have 2 questions. One is in regards to the special fund positions. For how long do our current designated special funds actually support these positions? For the entirety of this fiscal year, for a portion of next fiscal year? You can probably imagine my question, which is, these positions are special funded. Will they be general funded next year, or will you be asking that, or do you have a plan for getting further special funds to support these positions going forward?
Yeah, no, again, it depends. I mean, it's hard to say on the grant, right? Some grants run a period of years, some are just a single year. It all depends, and then you're constantly looking for other grant dollars at the same time to add to it. Now, what you don't want to do in some cases is wind up chasing and the flavor of the week for whatever's out there, and you kind of get mission creep on the position a little bit. But largely the idea is to at least garner funding through at least 1 or 2 years. Now, the potential is always there to move over any special fund into a general fund. But again, right now, can't say that that's the case. The sustainability position was in last year's budget. We were unsuccessful last year with identifying a funding source. But we believe that we're going to be we'll be successful this year in identifying and being able to fill the position. But again, you know, these are special fund and you know, we'll see how it goes in the future, but that would be for a future conversation on terms of moving anything over to general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Madison. And my second last question, Madam Chair, is probably Mr. Zinn, which is, I guess I'm looking at the brass tacks. How much would $1 million get you towards starting such a project? It seems to me to be a large multi-year effort that would require significantly money invested into it than just $1 million. And so how do you expect this beginning fund to actually launch a project of that ambition? Thank you, Measure.
Sure. And I think that's a very fair question. I think I think there's sort of two different ways that this is very helpful. The first is that it helps fund some of the planning and engineering, sort of getting down to brass tacks is exactly what the network looks like. Positioning us for things like federal funds. There's been a lot of discussion at the federal and state level about funding broadband networks. And having a plan that's credible, that's drawn out, has been very successful in other infrastructure projects, particularly roadway projects in the past during times of stimulus to get funding. And I think that this is a way for us to position New Haven to be able to take advantage of the large pools of money that are coming down the pike. Secondly, if you look at the doing a pilot installation, a proof of concept, that also helps funders have a lot more confidence. Laying fiber is, we've heard from commercial providers for broadband is, somewhere around 50,000 a mile. We have 232 miles of road, and then it's about $500 a customer drop. So if you do all the math out, yes, it's a lot more than $1 million. However, it is enough to both position us and show New Haven's commitment to the concept, but also do a fairly substantial proof of concept on it.
Thank you, Mr. Zinn. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty, moving right along. Good evening, Alder Ernie Santiago. Thank you for being here. Do you have any questions for the mayor's office?
Yeah, sorry. First of all, sorry for being late. No question at this time.
Thank you, sir. Alder DeCola?
No, my question was asked already. Thank you.
All righty. Alder Morrison?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alder Walker Myers?
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All righty. Alder Festa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. You mentioned Mr. Madison, that is, you mentioned reduction in the contractual services limit. What have been eliminated in that $9,571?
Michael, remind me what it was.
Yep. So other contractual for the mayor's office is used for just overall operations of the mayor's office department, along with lobbyist service that are split between the mayor's office and finance. So in looking at the mayor's office, we're looking at doing more efficiencies within the mayor's office in regards to supply, services, and other matters that will make up that $9,000. Again, that the other contractual services is really like the catch-all for the mayor's office because it encompasses their whole operations. So again, we're just going to look at doing things more efficiently in the mayor's office, so we don't have to spend that $9,700.
Okay. I guess that will lead me to some other lines of questioning related to some of the vacancies that we have in the budget, such as the controller's office, which has been vacant for just a year or just over a year. How many vacancies do we have, and how many vacancies do we have in particular for director leadership positions that are vacant? And what is the plan for hiring, since those are important positions to have for transparency purposes, particularly the controller?
I mean,
Gosh.
no, go ahead. I mean,
Go ahead, Sean.
I'm sure you have the number. One of the things we're looking at doing is, we're engaging recruiters to help with executive searches on some of the more difficult. One of the things we find it's largely two things that are challenges. One is residency requirement for some of these significant positions is always one, and the second is competitive wages. A lot of times in the private sector, we cannot match that, and people can make significantly more in the private sector. Look, you kind of really want to do government work and serve people. I don't think the city of New Haven pays poorly, but it is not competitive out there in the private sector. So we're going to turn to some recruiters and see if we can get some help identifying individuals that would be good fits that would be willing to establish residency inside the city. And that's going to be important.
Yep. So right now, I think we have 3 executive level positions open. Executive Director of LCI, Controller, and Chief Administrative Officer. In total, we have about 90 open positions, 90 to 95 open positions, just in general, including those 3.
Professor?
Okay, and the plan is to fill those 90 positions, if possible?
Absolutely. I think so one of the things that, we hear often is as these positions are vacant or a position is eliminated, the work does not go away, right? The work has to be done. So, I showed a chart in the budget overview of how we're at the lowest staff level position that we've been at in a long time for the city our size. We are currently working my office, HR. We have different personnel meetings every day. But again, a lot of these, the positions that are listed are general funds. So that means they have to go through the civil service process. And to be clear, the 90 to 95 I mentioned are non-sworn positions. So that's absent of any police or fire positions that may be vacant. So again, we have to go through the civil service process with our limited staff for every position that's not a part-time position. We have to post for 2 weeks, do the test, do the interviews for the top 3 candidates, which civil service. So that can take a while, especially depending on if it's a specialized position. But I think, with our staffing level, it would be very hard to take a look at, these positions and cutting any more, because I think that would be more added stress to the current workforce that we have.
And it's also kind of worth noting that there's a bit of an aging workforce here at work too in the city. That's you're seeing that come into play. It's kind of like it skews up an older demographic at the end, and we have a big hump at a younger. Right? There's like it dips down in on. In the middle with workforce that's been here for a number of years, but not a senior workforce. So it's a challenge. But these are also things that other municipalities across America are facing as well. There was a lot more hiring, and people came in the 90s into city government. Found a good job, became, they found it as a way, a means to get into the middle class, and they stayed, and they are now beginning to exit, and you're seeing a lot of that.
Well, that, and it's also costly for testing. So I'm going to assume that's all in the budget, as well as engaging recruiters is in the budget, because that's also very costly.
So
Madam
testing on
Chair,
our side is,
Mr. Gormley, one moment. I
Yep,
think the
no problem.
budget for testing would fall under human resources, which would fund under your department, right, Ms. Gormley? And not the mayor's office. So we should ask questions when we're talking about the correct section of budget. Mayor's office has 2 staff positions. It's not a very big part of the budget, but if we want to get into HR issues, I think we should say that until Mr. Gorman is talking about his department.
Yeah,
actually, Vice Chair, I'll probably be on, but I think Human Resources is going to go on with CAO.
Okay,
Yep.
so then testing, which is in course very important, and we talked about it many times, and we should. That's really a question for when we're dealing with HR representatives who gets directly to it. So let's stick with the mayor's office, which actually a very small part of the budget and the organization.
That's fine. I can respect that, and I will ask when the time comes. It just was mentioned during their discussion and thought I would question it. But okay, thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Moving right along. Alder Furlow, any questions?
I have no questions regarding the mayor's office, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, any questions for the mayor's office, ma'am?
I have no questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alder Hurt
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time.
and Alder Decker. Any questions for the mayor's office, sir?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have none. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, mayor's office.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Moving right along to the registrar of voters office.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, Ms. Chanel. How are you?
I'm well. How about yourself?
Fine, thank you. May we have your name and address for the record, please?
Yes, Chanel Evans, 1460 LT Grasso Boulevard.
Thank you, ma'am.
Michael Gormley, Michael
Sorry.
Gormley, 45 Jefferson Road, Brantford, Connecticut.
And I know my counterpartner is up here. I'm not sure if she was able to get in. I know through her audio, she's able to speak, not through video.
And when she does decide to speak, we would like her name and address for the record, okay?
Alrighty.
Go ahead, Mr.
All right,
Brown.
so thank you, Madam Chair. So we're looking at the Registrar of Voters Office for the mayor's proposed fiscal year 2021-22 budget. As you can see on the screen, we really do not have any non-personnel changes related to the Registrar of Voters budget. What we do have is a small increase in regards to part-time election payroll. So we are increasing that from $325,000 to $370,000, which Ms. Evans can go into a little more. I will note there was a discrepancy on the 102 page of the budget versus the expenditure page. The expenditure page showed the correct amount, $370,000, and that is what the budget rolls up to. But the page that lists all the personnel under 162 only showed $325,000. So again, the budget is balanced and all correct. It's just that one page that had the discrepancy in it. So again, the amount is $370,000 for part-time election payroll. So I will turn it over to Ms. Evans at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. Appreciate it. So as Mr. Gormany stated, we did an increase with the poll workers. Reason being is because we have the primary for September, we have the general for November, we have the town committee in March, and then we always want to be prepared for a special election if one perhaps to pop up. We have hired a few more people per polling place due to COVID. And we do understand in some cases where we have big turnouts, we have to hire additional people in that case as well. So that's a little bit of the reason why we had to increase that budget. Everything else is pretty much the same. Again, COVID played a big part in us dibbing and dabbing in things and ordering new things, etc. So we're pretty much open to questions. Oh, we are also, like Michael Smart, City Town Clerk, has said, we are closed to the public, but we are still accommodating. You can call our office between 9 and 5, 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. You call us 203-946-8035. We'll come down to help assist you for things that you are requesting and or to register to vote. And just to put it out in the air, June 14th is the last day to switch in between major parties for you to qualify for the September primary. That is all for me.
Madam Chair, you are currently muted. There you go.
I'm sorry. Is there anyone else from your office that would like to speak at this time, Ms. Chanel?
Marlene just texted me. For some reason, her audio is not working.
I believe I have it working
now. Oh, you
now.
are up there. Oh, no, she's here.
Yeah.
State your name and your address for the record, please.
I will. Marlene Napolitano, 25 Russell Street, New Haven.
Thank you, Ms. Napolitano. Go ahead if you would like to speak, ma'am.
Well, I just really wanted to reiterate some of what Chanel said. I wanted to stress that during last year, it was very, very stressful. Everything was so unpredictable. Things changed on a daily basis. And I do really want to, honor my staff and the office, how hard we work. And we came through some very difficult times. The need for the extra personnel in the office was very, very important to us. And the need for the extra poll workers. Without them, it would have been even harder. So the additional funding is actually something that we actually do need.
Okay. Any other thoughts before I open it up for questions from the committee, folks? All righty. Well, at this time, then I'll start the questioning. Alder Marchand, do you have questions for the Registrar of Voters office, sir?
Just one, Madam Chair, which is, before I ask a question, I want to thank both Ms. Evans and Ms. Napolitano for their hard work. It's an incredibly important function of our government that they are in charge of and essential to our democracy. Last year was an extraordinary year, both with pandemic and record turnout and record voting. We're still with the pandemic, although we have hope that we're turning the corner. We have an election this year, although if only it would have the same turnout this year as it did last year, but probably it won't, because the presidential election is not being tested this year. Neither is the constitutional office of the state. So do you think that the extra resources that you mentioned are as necessary this year as they were last year? Or do you feel that having additional election day resources and part-time personnel remains very important?
Yes, they still remain important. The thing is, I'll use your ward as an example. I believe we had 3 lines there. So this year we will back it down to 2. So in our heavier areas, we will drop a line and the rest of it will still remain the same, but we still need to have the additional people, meaning greeters, translators. We still have to have the normal poll workers where we have to have by state statute, and then along with some help to make this a successful process not get anyone sick, etc. So that I can say. And I do anticipate hardworking feet on the ground, canvassing, making sure they do have new voters, people changing their address if need be to come out to vote. So to have someone in our office as well, yes, may not be the same length of time, but we will have a few people in our office as well to help. And Marlene, you
Thank
can
you.
jump in if you need. Sorry, Alder Merchant.
Thank you for that response. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, moving right along. Alder Ernie Santiago, any questions?
I have one, and once again, thank you for your hard work, Ms. Evans. I got a quick question. My ward, sometimes some people vote in Rosewood ward, some people vote in Wilbur Cross, and some people vote here in Chatham and Row. And there's always confusion. Are you gonna use some of that money to, address that situation? Because a lot of people don't know, even though this year is not presidential or state reps, but some of them are confused because in my ward, we got 3 reps. I think it's Apolillo on one side, Candelaria on one side, and then Lamar. Is that going to be addressed so more people come out to vote and they know where to come to vote?
Yes, so every year, every election, we're not one of the towns that only send out notices to individual where their polling place has changed, but we send it out to every active registered voter in the city of New Haven, and it tells them where they should go to vote. So we will be sending those out. I will be reaching out to you guys as well to kind of figure out what we can do better to kind of help people. Also, I don't think this will require money, but even updating our system with the City of New Haven website. We're working on something with that in the near future. And then also want to have the conversation that we just finished census. So in 2023, I believe you guys have the hands-on to kind of pick and choose so we can kind of figure out who's in your area to kind of like help better the line so people aren't going over here, over there,
all over the place.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty, moving right along. Alder DeCola, any questions for the Registrar of Voters Office?
No, they did a great job, and like when my colleague Alder Marchand, we had 3 lines, made a big difference. The greeters, what they're doing and improving on speeding up voting is a great thing. So I commend that whole office, but I have no questions. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alder Morrison.
Yes. Yes. I don't have any questions, but I do want to thank Ms. Evans. Things were really good at for this last election. Dixwell was one of the communities that even got some extra festivities that made that long, hard day go by quick. And so whatever it is that you're doing, I commend you. Please continue the training the mandatory training that you have put in place. I don't care if you've been a whatever for 50 years, you still need to go to training. And, just keep up the good work. And thank you for continuously making ways to help our residents make extra money, because that money that they received this go round, especially this go round, really, really did some benefits for our residents. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Alder Morrison. Next, Alder Walker Myers, any questions?
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Alder Festa?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions. First, I want to thank you for fixing the website because it was a little confusing for some reason, but we learned a lot with this past election. I know you guys came and presented before CSEP quite a bit. So thank you for doing that. Do you know if there's potentially any federal aid money that can go towards the temporary workers to address, the extra staff for COVID related voting?
Yes, so as we stated, go ahead, Marlene.
No, I was just going to say that I don't believe at this point there is.
Correct. So as Marlene was stating before, anything can happen at any given second. Funds that the state was giving at one point, they may not give us the same funds, but I do reach out ever so often to the state to kind of see what grants are out there that we are eligible for to not put stress on the city budget.
Okay, so it's good to hear you stay in touch with the state as well. And hopefully they're informing your office as well as to any available funds. Do you have any leftover supplies from the presidential election, like masks and sanitizer, so we don't have to spend again?
Yes, we do have some materials more than others. We were going to kind of give it back to what other departments may need it now, but some of the stuff we want to hold on, but we don't want anything to dry out. I know we have, well, that's not part of the question, but we do have some materials that we will try to carry over. Yes, to answer directly.
Okay, and I think I heard, and clarify this for me if you don't mind, but are we hiring more temps than last year, the same amount? And if so, why? Because it's a smaller election. I shouldn't say smaller election, but
I get what you're saying.
It's not a presidential election.
We will get there one day. We will.
They're tinier
as a team. Yes.
No.
So again, the numbers go from September, November, March, and then if there's a possible special election after that. So that's what falls into that fiscal. And yes, we will still be hiring the extra people which are greeters, which we never really hired before COVID. So you still have that. And then depending on switching up things, I believe I heard Alder Smith was up here. That's one of her polling places that will have to move. So we may need additional people at the polling at one location to kind of say, hey, polling is down this way, et cetera, just so no one gets discouraged and no one feels like that voting doesn't matter to them because the polling location has changed or whatever. Again, we're just trying to be prepared for things that may happen because we were hit by a lot of surprises last year, but I think we handled it very well. I believe we handled a lot of stuff that was thrown at us at the last second very well.
It was indeed a challenging election. I appreciate all your office efforts. And thank you, Madam Chair. No further questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I do have one more.
Oh.
I just
back to Alder Festa. No, go ahead.
It's like you can't reach fast enough to the mute button. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. May I proceed? I can't hear you, but I can see you shaking your head.
You hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, please. Last question to because we're moving on. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. It was just clarification on page 3-34 of the budget book where I'm assuming that when you remove from the voter list, you remove debts and people that have moved. Is there anything else that gets removed from the voter list? And then just if you could explain somewhat the electors portion where number of registered active Democrats, Republicans, minority parties, and unaffiliated, the numbers change. I'm assuming that some of the changes are due to people maybe changing parties or, whatever else. If you can just clarify that, thank you.
The last part, you may have to repeat to me unless Marlene picks it up. So we have purges, which means if someone has passed on, we have someone that goes over to vital stats to get out of the certificate of deaths. Sometimes we do obituaries, and we also have, for people who have not voted in 4 years, that state statute that we have to send out a notice. If they don't reply, we have to take them. No, I'm sorry. When they're inactive for 4 years, they're taken off. And if someone, Mel has come back, we send out another one. If that comes back, then we have to make them inactive, which they can restore themselves back at the polling place or just online, DMV, etc. And I believe that kind of answers the same question as your last question.
Right.
We have multiple changes, whether it's an address change, whether it's a party change, etc. I believe you guys get a report, or maybe you guys just get who's new in your area. But anytime you guys need a breakdown of that, please do not hesitate to reach out to myself or Marlene, and we'll be more than happy to do that. Unfortunately, I do not have exact numbers with me tonight. As you can tell, I'm not in the office, but I have no problem with giving you that information.
Great, thank you. I appreciate it. No further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Fester. Moving right along to Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no budget-related questions, but I will say a job well done to our office of our registrar's office. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, any questions?
Madam Chair, I have no questions at this time, but I do want to say thank you to Ms. Chanel and to all her staff. And I understand a lot of changes will continue. And I know that you are staying the course with the state's registrar office. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez. Alder Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions, but I do have a comment to compliment the Office of Registered Voters. Very smooth transition during our last election, and I want to thank them for the job and the hard work they put in and making sure that our residents who are in the neighborhoods of needs, who are working on the polls, they were able to have a good Thanksgiving as well. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Alder
you.
Hurd. Alder Decker, questions for the Registrar of Voters Office?
I have no questions. Thank you for what you do. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Righty, thank you, committee. I would like to make a comment to Ms. Chanel and Ms. Napolitano. Thank you for your hard work, during all these elections. I know you guys struggle with the voter machines. That still has not been addressed by the Secretary of State's office. Those machines need some updating because, I've experienced in Ward 24 issues where those machines have broken down in the middle of voting. And I think other wards have experienced a similar situation, which at the end of the day, those things need to be addressed because it puts an additional strain on the poll workers, first and foremost. It makes the residents get disheartened with the process when they are not able to put their votes through, you know what I mean? And that's part of a bigger issue with the Secretary of State's office to address the machines that are currently being used in our city. There are better equipment out there, and one of the tasks should be to address that part of the voting process for the city of New Haven. So I'm just putting that out there because it's a necessity that needs to be addressed. But thank you, folks, for your hard work at all of our elections. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
But I also do want to, since you brought that up, like I said, I will be reaching out to you guys and your co-chairs as well. I would like to write a letter to kind of see if there's any way they can pass legislators where we can get new machines. But I will let you know, they probably won't purchase them. So that will be a big project, a lot of money to just kind of prepare ourselves. But it's a conversation we can all have together and as individuals. And I thank you guys for your hard work and participation. And getting to know our office a little bit more, and we look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Thank you very much, ladies, and for the Office of Registrar of Voters. Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good
Thank you.
night.
Thank you. Moving right along to the Assessor's Office, Mr. Gorman.
All right, while we wait, I'll just say my name and address. Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Brantford, Connecticut.
Thank you. And I expect Mr. Pooling. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to the committee. Can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can. Name and address for the record, please.
Alex Pullen, 6 Pequot Avenue, North Haven, Connecticut.
I take it we're sharing screen here. Go right ahead.
Yep. All right, thank you. This is the mayor's proposed FY 21-22 budget overview for the Office of the Assessor. We really do not have any changes within the office. When you look at the Board of Alder approved 21 budget going into fiscal year 22, the only thing that really happens on the personnel side is the elimination of the office manager position at $1. And that is really so we get more of an accurate full-time count. Throughout the budget and in some departments, you'll see the elimination of $1 position. Just to understand the $1 position, whether it was there or not, if it was fully funded, it would need to come back before this board anyways for the funding in order to be filled. So whether it was at $1 or eliminated, if we wanted to do an office manager position, we would have to come back at some time during the fiscal year. There are no changes to the non-personnel section of Mr. Pullen's budget. The non-personnel section of his budget is really just related to different areas such as registration and dues for classes that his staff takes to maintain their licenses and certifications, and to get updated on various things going on in the assessor's world. About 95% of his budget is really personnel on the general fund side. We kind of went over some of this during his the budget overview, but again, one of the main functions of the assessor's office is the grand list. The total grand list is about 15.9 billion, where 6.7 billion is taxable. That's how we generate our tax revenue, and 8.5 billion is non-taxable. That's when we talk about 60% of the property value in the city cannot be taxed. Again, this slide, what you've seen in the budget overview, just kind of outlines Yale University makes up a good portion of 3.5 billion of that non-taxable, followed by Yale New Haven Hospital, municipal property, which is property that the city owns, state and nonprofits. This is what you've seen also. This is just the grand list for fiscal year 22, which makes up the total tax revenue. On the general fund side, the grand list grew by $87.9 million between grand list 19, which makes up fiscal year 21, and grand list 20, which makes up fiscal year 22. And this next slide is, again, per the municipal fiscal indicators, which haven't been updated yet. But as you can see, as of Grand List 2018, to compare New Haven to other cities and towns as far as the non-taxable value, as you can see, New Haven is double the next city, which is Hartford, in exempt value. So again, as that exempt value grows, that's less money that the city is actually collecting. And again, you've seen proposals for tiered piloting, which I'll get into a little bit more in the finance presentation to sort of address some of this situation. But again, the main function of the assessor's office is to look at the grand list, and I'm sure I took some of Alex's presentation, so I'll turn it over to him.
Well, Mike, not only did you take some of my presentation, you pretty much took all of it. There's no thunder left. But what I will say is, as you all know, the assessor's function is to list, discover, and value property. We're currently gearing up for the 2021 revaluation. I spoke about this a bit about 3 weeks ago when I did a presentation on the grand list. But in terms of our budget today, as Michael stated, there's no change. With 95% of our budget being salary, that leaves only just slightly under $40,000 in non-salary for our budget. The majority of that is 10,000 of the 40,000 is for the Board of Assessment Appeals, which is part of state statute. It's mandated that we provide for the Board of Assessment Appeals to allow people a mechanism to dispute their property values. Another 10,000 comes in the form of money that's allocated for student interns. And pretty much the rest of our budget goes to professional meetings and keeping up the licenses that are not only required by state statute, but also by the job descriptions of certain personnel in the office. We've got our real estate assessors and appraisers. We've got our memberships to the Connecticut Association of Assessing Officers so that we can maintain those professional relationships. And even now, amongst COVID-19 and the pandemic, the state of Connecticut has not eased up on those restrictions. So we still, as assessors, have to get our 50 hours of education within 5 years in order for our designations to remain valid. And what they've done is they switched a lot of our assessor schooling to now online and Zoom meetings, which may be able to save us a little bit of money because we do not have to do the full week at UConn. Other than that, the budget's pretty self-explanatory, and with no changes, I will open it up to the committee for any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Pullen. Alderman Shawn, you may start.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I wanted to thank Mr. Harmony for reminding us about that grand list information, which Mr. Paul did review with us a few weeks ago at the workshop preceded our first public hearing. I encourage colleagues to focus on the budgetary part of his of the item for us, was really about is enough money or too much money to allow the proper functioning of the important department. And I guess I have a question in that regard, which is I think there may be monies elsewhere in our city's budget that deals with this topic, perhaps in the Corporation Council. I'm not sure, but there's plenty of litigation and appeals that have to be dealt with. And I don't think $10,000 would cover that. And so, you know, we like have contracts with law firms, for example. And so, but I don't see that as department's budget. Does that reside elsewhere?
It does.
In the general fund budget.
It used to be a part of the assessor's budget, but because it was maintained and administered by Corporation Council, that probably about 4 or 5 years ago moved to the Corporation Council's budget. So the 10,000 is just for paying the appointed members of the Board of Assessment Appeals and for their supplies and mailings.
Right. It just struck me, I was reading through the material and trying to remember prior year's budgets, that there's some money that was somewhere else. And I thought there might be more money in other contract services, given the scope of the effort of doing a revaluation. But as you're telling me, you can accomplish it with the budget.
Well, the revaluation doesn't come under contractual services because it's and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a capital project, correct?
So in last year's budget, we redesignated certain capital funding, and we ended up with a budget of about $900,000, which takes into account everything that Mr. Pullen's office needs for reval.
Thank you for reminding me of that, gentlemen, because when I was just reviewing this department's particular budget today, it just struck me not nearly enough money to accomplish something as large as this. But it does thank you for reminding me about that resignation It's helpful for the members of the committee to remember that there are dollars for this endeavor, but they're just living elsewhere budget, some in the capital budget, and so the legal appeal part of it in the Corporation Counsel's office, which I will look at in just a moment. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alder Marchand. Moving right along, Alder Ernie Santiago.
No question at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder DeCola.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Alder Morrison.
At this time, Madam Chair, thank you.
Alder Walker Myers. Alder Walker Myers.
Madam Chair, I believe she's having some technical difficulties.
Okay, we'll come back to her then. Alder Festa.
Hi, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions for Mr. Pullen. With the grant list that has grown almost to about 2 million, what does that mean for actual dollars collected? You know, more revenue for New Haven, and how does that translate in what we'll collect in June?
Well, because the mill rate's not set yet, we don't know exactly in terms of tax dollars how much it's gonna affect the city.
Well, assuming the mill rate based on, well, which budget? Pick the budget you want, the higher mill rate or the lower mill rate.
I think the answer to your question, Alder Festa, I believe, is even at the, the budget that we're endorsing, the Forward Together budget with a flat mill rate of 43.88, with the growth in the grand list, it generated about between 2.2 and 2.5 million dollars in additional tax revenue. The reason for that is because of the way the charter has us budget the tax revenue, and with COVID and the collection rate being a little bit lower than the previous year, that's why it was around 2.2 to 2.5 million dollars.
Okay, so really it's just going to stay that it's not going to change that much with collections that come up in June.
Correct.
Okay.
Again, I think as Mr. Pullen said, it will depend. I mean, just from a pure dollar standpoint, it's about that we'll take the high end, 2.5 million, but the collection rate is going to also depend on what parameters are set by the state, like if there's another deferral program or whatever the case is as far as collection. So he's right in that sense that we really won't know that going into the new tax year in July.
And the increase was modest in the grand list. It wasn't a large increase because, as stated, we're not in a revaluation year. So the net growth was less than 2%.
Okay, so it was less than 2%. Okay. I mean, you mentioned, deferrals. If we didn't have deferrals on all these properties, what would our grand list look like?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because we're then assuming that all these projects would have been built without the assessment deferrals. And we happen to know, I mean, if you spoke with economic development, that a lot of these properties were only built contingent on the fact that they were able to get the deferral. So, I mean, if you want just a hard number of us taking all of the deferrals off of the grand list, then, I could work up a scenario in Excel and get that to you. But again, there's no way to guarantee that these same properties would have come to fruition without the deferrals being in play.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that, but I guess it'd be nice to get the money sooner with all this development happening, and
Madam Chair, a point of order. I think that our colleague from the 10th Ward is moving beyond the actual operational budget for the department. And I know it's an important topic, and I think we had information request in a prayer meeting that we need to follow on about the default issue, but we need to stick to the actual budget of this department.
Okay, yeah, the word deferral again came up in conversation through Mr. Gormany, and so I thought of asking while we were on the topic, but thank you. I look forward to hopefully additional dollars from some of these deferral programs. Thank you, Mr. Gormany and Mr. Pullen.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow. Oh, before we continue, Alder Walker Myers, I see you back on the call. Did you have any questions?
No questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. Thank you, ma'am. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Mr. Pullen, and thank you for all the work that you're doing in your office. Could you remind me, how many full-time employees do you have?
Full-time employees that I have right now, I believe 8. So, Mike, Cliff. 8.
Okay, and do you have any temps there or?
No, we don't employ temporary workers in our office.
Okay. That's all the questions I have for now, Madam Chair. Thank you. And thank you again, Mr. Pullen.
Oh,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Alder Furlow. Alex, I just need to, you have 8 employees currently, but we have some vacancies in the assessor's office that we're looking to fill. So the total, if they were staffed, would be 11.
Sorry about that.
At full capacity, there are 11 staff members.
Correct.
Okay, so noted. All righty. Miss Evelyn Rodriguez, any questions for the assessor's office?
I only have one question, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Pullen. The question that I have is in reference to the grand list, the non-taxable, the 8.5, in reference to Yale University and Yale New Haven Hospital and the other non-taxable exempt. The residents of the city of New Haven, their homes are assessed. And my question to you is there any type of assessment that your workers are doing in reference to our non-exempt? And the other question is, do we know actually what the gains are in reference to our non-exempt? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, to answer the first question, what we are doing to revalue the taxable properties is the same thing that we are doing to revalue the exempt properties. There's no difference in terms of the revaluation. Whether a property is on the tax rolls or not, we still need to assess it and determine how much it's worth. So that would be the answer to the first question. And to the second, yes, we do chart year by year the growth in both the taxable and the exempt grand list.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. That is it.
Thank you, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez. Alder Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. On Alder Decker.
I have no questions. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Pullen and Mr. Gormany for the presentation from the assessor's office.
Thank you.
All righty. Moving right along. Next on our list is persons with disabilities.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Dupree. How are you?
Good. My name is Michelle Dupre, and I actually am the former director of the Department of Services for Persons with Disabilities. I prepared this budget, but I since moved to the Office of Corporation Counsel. But I'm so happy to share with you tonight that yesterday, Gretchen Knopf started with the City of New Haven, serving as the new director of the Department of Services for Persons with Disabilities. Ms. Knopf comes to the city with a significant amount of experience as both the former executive director of the Office of Protection and Advocacy for People with Disabilities and Executive Director of Disability Rights Connecticut. So she's here with me tonight watching the proceedings, and I'm sure you'll all enjoy working with her, but I felt it was a little unfair that on day 2 to make her present the budget. So I'm here doing that. As for the record, my address is 175 South End Road, East Haven, and the department has requested $96,804, which is zero growth from last year. And over the past year, most of my work has been focused on the city's COVID response, both for employees and the public. And I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I'd be happy to answer any particular questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Dupree. We will start with Alder Marchand. Do you have any questions for Ms. Dupree?
Yeah, sure. I only want to say thank you, Ms. Dupree, for her leadership in her former role as director of this department. And I wish her all the best in her new role in the Corporation Counsel's office. And I welcome Ms. Knopf to the City of New Haven and wish her the best. No questions at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Moving right along to Alder Ernie Santiago.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Alder DeCola.
No questions at this time.
Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alder Walker Myers.
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alder Festa.
No questions, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Ms. Dupree for her dedication to the department, and glad she's still staying at City Hall. And welcome, Gretchen Knopf. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Furlow.
No questions, Madam Chair, but I'm certainly going to miss Ms. Dupree in the office. She's been a valuable resource, and I hope I can still ask questions.
Of course you can. Of course you can.
Thank you very much, and welcome to our new director.
Moving right along, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. Thank you, Mr. Dupree.
Pardon me. Alder Hurt.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you so much. But thank you, Mr. Dupree, for your services, and welcome, Ms. Knopf, to the city.
Yes, indeed. Alder Decker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions. Thank you.
All righty. First, let me just say thank you, Ms. Dupree, for your hard work and dedication to the city, and welcome Ms. Gretchen Knopf to the Disability Services Office as their new director. Glad to have you.
Thank you very much.
All righty. Thank you all. And we're going to, thank you, ma'am. We're going to move on to the Corporation Counsel's office now, please. Good evening, Ms. King. Your name and address for the record, please.
Yes. Good evening, Madam Chair and Mr. Vice Chair and honorable alders. My name is Patricia King. I'm the Corporation Counsel. I live at 32 Vista Terrace in New Haven.
Okay, and I see you have a colleague with you, Mr. Robert Williams.
Yes, Rod Williams. Rod, yes, is also here.
I'm Rod Williams, for the record, 20 Lancelot Drive, North Haven, Connecticut. Nice to be here.
Thank you, folks. You may proceed.
And, oh, I'm sorry. I also have Paula Purnell, who is our executive assistant. I'm sorry. Executive assistant who's also here.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Paula Purnell. I reside at 108 Branford Road in North Branford.
And Michelle Dupre, who you've just heard from, who's now a Deputy Corporation Counsel, is also with us.
Very good. All righty, welcome
And
everyone.
I am Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. I actually have Miss King's PowerPoint on my computer. All right, so in starting off the mayor's fiscal year 21-22 budget overview for the Office of Corporation Counsel, which is our legal department for the city. Corporation Counsel also encompasses our Office of Labor Relations as well, which deals a lot with the union matters and union contracts and labor unions with the city. So the fiscal year 21 Board of Alder approved budget was $2,667,499. In both versions of the mayor's budget, and again focusing on the Forward Together budget, the budget increases for Corporation Counsel to $2,816,999. The primary changes in the budget are, excuse me, are in three areas. The reduction in other contractual services by $10,000, which was part of the cut that the city did within the fiscal year 21 budget. We did increase the labor relations legal lawyer account by $20,000. So that account helps us hire legal services related to labor matters and contract negotiations. Ms. King and her team will get into that a little bit more. And we did increase the labor relations other contractual services line to assist labor relations also with labor and employment matters. Earlier in the fiscal year, we changed an assistant corporation counsel position to a deputy corporation counsel position to help with labor and employment matters, which is an area of focus right now for the city. So we started this whole process in looking at those and in looking at labor and employment matters and how we can reduce the cost to the city with current in-house personnel as well as outside services. And that's currently the role that Ms. Dupree holds right now. So what I will do is turn it over to Ms. King at the moment and her team.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gormany. And I would also like to note that our Director of Labor Relations, Attorney Kathleen Simpson, is also on the call. I noticed the screen populated quite a bit when our turn came, so I feel quite popular now. I do have a very brief presentation. I realize the hour is late, but I wanted to let the board know some of the other duties that our attorneys perform in addition to simply writing contracts and defending the city in lawsuits. So I have a slide here starting with our deputies, and I'll run through this really quickly. Rod Williams, who's on the call, is our litigation deputy who supervises the litigation attorneys. He himself carries a caseload of 90 cases right now. He handles administrative and tax appeals. As Alder Marchand is well aware, he advises city plan and board of zoning appeals. He's still on that. He advises the registrar of voters, works with outside counsel on cases that are handled by those firms, including the police misconduct cases, which are often referred to outside counsel. Catherine Lamar is our transaction deputy, is not able to be on the call tonight due to a family situation. She oversees our transaction team, handles various contract problems. She is working very hard on our FOIA policy to develop a citywide policy and represents the city in all the FOIA complaints that are received. And she has recently developed a policy regarding the protection of confidential health information, which also involves upgrading our cybersecurity around that and technical issues around that, and she advises the Q House. Michelle Dupre is our news deputy who handles labor and employment. Up until yesterday, she was still doing the job of the Director of Disability Services. So we're very glad to have Gretchen Knopf join our team, and Michelle can now devote more of her time to handling the Corporation Council matters. Michelle has jumped in and started to handle some CHRO cases and a couple of the city general litigation cases. She's been involved in the return to work protocols. In addition to the other COVID issues she's dealt with, she's starting to develop a tracking system through VOCI so that we can track all the various leaves and labor absences in one database so that we have a better handle on all that information. She chairs the labor and employment meetings dealing with different labor and employment issues across the city. And she also has taken over advising the Board of Police Commissioners. So she has everybody, all the deputies are very full plates. Our litigation team, their lawyer, Audrey, who's been with the city more than 20 years, has 63 cases. She advises the fire commissioners. Kevin Cassini has 53 cases. He advises the police department. He's been working on MOUs with the various other police departments and other police policy issues. He also advises TT&P. And I refer to Kevin as a hospitality specialist during COVID because he spent a lot of time doing contracts with hotels to house homeless individuals and arrange for food delivery and also housing a first responder. So Kevin went into the hospitality business when the pandemic hit. Victoria Church is one of our litigators. She has 66 cases. She's the hearing officer for contested parking tickets. She advises the Community Service Administration's harm reduction team, and she worked with me on the worker recall ordinance, which I'm sure you'll remember. And we do have a vacancy. Mike Wallach, who you may know, was with the city for more than 20 years, retired. He's going to be very hard to replace, although we do have a couple interviews coming up. There are approximately 20 cases that he left behind, most of which are police misconduct cases in state and federal court. The federal court work Mike was an expert in. They're very intense and complicated cases. So he left big shoes to fill, and we're working on doing that now. Our transaction team, we have Stacy Werner, who handles contracts, advises the health department, and handles our energy buys. And I know the explanation is more than I'm going to go into right now, but she did get the city a great discount when she negotiated our energy buys for this year and our winter exposure for next year. Robert Scott's done 100 contracts this year. He does economic development contracts, legal services agreement, agreements with state agencies and CDBG agreements, and he advises the Civil Service Board. And Robert has kind of waded into litigation and has taken up a couple of CHRO cases for himself. Michael Pinto came to us from the Board of Education, where he was the Chief Operating Officer. He works primarily in a position that's funded, or he works in a position that's funded through special funds from LCI. So most of his work is working with LCI. He does work with the city on real estate transactions since he's got the expertise in that area. And he has been working with the team on tenant protection ordinances, which are currently in the draft stage. And finally, we have Aaliyah Alexiades, who is assigned almost exclusively to the Board of Education, where his plate is pretty much kept very full. He's very busy with BOE work. He also helps us with FOIA issues, First Amendment issues, and he has taken up some litigation for the Board of Ed. So that's a quick overview of the Corp Council staff. Our numbers for this year, as you may imagine, litigation slowed down with the courts being closed for COVID. So we settled so far in this fiscal year 26 cases. The highest settlement amount was $202,400. The lowest was $250,000. We have 450 cases pending now, and so far for new cases into the fiscal year, we have had 126. So we're taking in more than have been resolved. I think, things will pick up for us once the courts start functioning at a little more brisk pace. But overall, our attorneys do a very good job negotiating settlements, especially in the state court matters. We're able to resolve matters at very, very reasonable amounts. And I really commend them. Last year when I did this budget meeting, I'd been in the job about 3 months. I didn't know that much about what my attorneys did I knew something, but not what I know today, obviously. And I have to say, I'm very proud of my team and they do great work. And I think the city's lucky to have them. The current work that we're doing this fiscal year, obviously the pandemic was probably the #1 issue. It interrupted a lot of our work. It involved, we were thrust into drafting emergency orders, teleworking policies, revising work protocols, and the hospitality business that I mentioned of housing first responders, homeless individuals, feeding them, making arrangements so that they were able to be safe during the pandemic. We've opened a FOIA portal so that people who want to make FOIA requests can do so online. One of my paralegals, Al Sulman, spends almost all his time doing FOIA. We get a lot of FOIA requests, and the portal has been a big help in tracking those requests. Once they come in through the portal, we're able to assign them a case number, and it's a lot easier to track them if they go through the portal than if they are sort of randomly sent to various department heads. And we are developing a citywide FOIA policy that is under review at this time. We have a policy developed for the protection of health information under HIPAA, which Catherine worked very hard to do. As Mike Gormany mentioned, we've been focusing on labor and employment issues and have established a close working relationship with labor relations. We're working to increase resources for labor relations so that we can respond to complaints of employee misconduct and grievances and other union matters, labor-related matters in a timely basis. And this year we did pass the worker recall ordinance, which I've already mentioned, and the dirt bike ordinance. So those are kind of the highlights. I know the hour is late and I don't want to take up too much more time with this. So I'd be happy to address any questions that you have.
All righty. Thank you, Ms. King. And with that, I'll start with Alder Marchand.
Thank you, Attorney King, for your presentation. It was useful to see some information about the organization and about the structure of the organization. I remember last time you here, about a year ago, we were talking about defunding an assistant corporation counsel position and funding, restoring fund to a deputy position, which is about $40,000 difference. And the question I recall having at the time was, why do you need that? How will it help? So I guess I repeat that question. You've had more deputies now. Do you feel like that having 3 deputy corporation counsels is helping you, and how? Because one might argue, why not have, if you're going to spend more money, why not just have more frontline attorneys? I'm interested to hear more about the benefits of the structure that you've put in. Thank you, Mr.
Okay. Well, I'll also I'll address it, and Michelle may want to address it. It's been a little bit difficult to evaluate up until now because Michelle has been doing 2 jobs until yesterday. So she hasn't been able to devote her sort of full-time to the labor and employment issues, but she does field a lot of questions now from the various departments on labor and employment related matters. So she does provide guidance to the various departments on those matters. As I said, she's working to develop a database of all the employees who might be out on administrative leave with pay, who might be out on FMLA, when those leaves might be up, and coordinates with labor relations so that we can have better control over that information. Because what we were finding was that there are some employees who have discipline issues with their jobs and file CHROs, often have issues regarding leaves and attendance at their employment. So, and there was really no one person coordinating that, at least in the Corporation Counsel's office. So by getting a handle on these problems when they first develop, we're hoping that we can work with the managers to do progressive discipline for these folks. And we also find that these individuals overlap, and they may have a grievance and then they turn around and file a CHRO, or they're being disciplined and they turn around and file a CHRO. And I think the better coordination is going to, down the road, improve our position when we have to defend these cases. I'm sorry if it was a little long-winded, but and I think Michelle can certainly address if she wants to add anything.
I think that one of my goals in the position is to streamline our employment structure. We have the Human Resources Department, we have Labor Relations, we have Risk Management. And so we have all these components throughout the city that talk a little bit, but I think we need a more seamless structure throughout the city in managing employment matters. And hopefully that getting a good handle on how people flow through those various departments will head off some of the problems as Pat described. And also one thing I would look to the future is maybe addressing with departments, if we can spot by tracking these issues, departments that have recurring issues or may have gaps in their knowledge base or ability to manage employee issues, that we can address those with that department that may have a trend that wasn't previously recognized. So that's it's more of a long-term big picture goal, but I think that proper monitoring and assistance to departments really can help improve their ability to manage problems.
Okay, thank you for those responses. I appreciate it. I'm going to say something that you might respond to. I'm not sure it's a question. Perhaps it'll turn into one, in which is, you know, we've seen over the last couple of years lots of labor-related issues become real thorny, different problems of the city, spill out into the public, and just been a mess in lots of different ways. So, the city being more proactive in how it manages labor relations seems right, but I'm wondering, is it just about having a stronger position to go after bad employees, or is it about working with HR and the union on a proactive problem-solving approach? And maybe you could say something about that, because at the end of the day, we want all the employees to be successful, the departments to run well. Certainly we want to have lawsuits and grievances, but at the end of the day, we also want employees to feel respected and supported. So I'm just wondering how I might respond to that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Well, I think there are those two aspects kind of go hand in hand. I think that the city has to be, or the city has to provide support to managers so they can start dealing appropriately with employees who have discipline problems or problems in the workplace early on in the process, so that, as I said, we can impose progressive discipline. We start out with giving them a letter of expectations. And then if that isn't clear enough and there's still problems, then we move on. But if we had established that record in a number of the problematic cases that we've seen, I think we would have been in a much better position to defend those cases. And then it's also part of what we do, labor relations, in terms of negotiating the contracts going forward, and labor relations setting out expectations for how discipline problems are going to be handled with the unions. And we've got a number of contracts coming up for negotiation this year, so maybe Attorney Simpson can speak to that to some extent. But all of that goes in hand. There's no sort of one simple solution, if that answers your question. I wish there were, but I think that that's kind of the goal. As Michelle said, it's sort of a long-term goal at this point, but that's the goal, is to try to improve our position from a management level. And I think, frankly, when we hold employees accountable, what we have seen is, I think, some of the employees who just are unhappy being held accountable leave. They either retire or they move on. And the good employees are happy. The good employees are, they feel that their work is recognized, the fact that they follow the rules, and the fact that they do what's asked of them without the distraction of problem employees in the workplace. I think it improves morale, and it makes the employees more productive and more successful.
Thank you for that response. I think giving me answers I need to understand the budgetary questions I had. Could have a much more discussion about employee relations and labor relations, but I think I've already gone far enough. And appreciate your response, Madam Chair.
Alder Marchand, we'd be happy to have that discussion with you anytime.
All righty. Thank you, Alder Marchand. Moving on to Alder Ernie Santiago. Any questions for the Corporation Counsel's Office or any of the attorneys on?
No question at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. Alder DeCola?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Alder Morrison?
Madam Chair, I do have a small question. This is a question I get a lot from constituents in regards to the small things that happen that always end up involving legal. So, sometimes constituents have issues, trees fall on their cars, things like that. And then they're brought to go through a whole process through the city clerk's office, and then the corp counsel's office gets involved, and then it's stuck. And people need to, get their cars repaired or whatever repaired, their house repaired, and they get nothing from the corp counsel's office. And the pandemic didn't make it, it definitely didn't make it any better. And so I'm just trying to find out where is that? Why are people getting, what is the bottleneck? Because I see your team, I see all the different things that you guys got going on. I see all the different cases, but at the same time, we do spend a lot of money outside of court counsel with other counsel to deal with other cases. And so I'm just trying to figure out how to help the small guy get more answers around their issues. So maybe Ms. King, you can answer that.
So Alder Morrison I just want to understand your question. By bottleneck, do you mean a bottleneck in terms of your constituents aren't getting a response from us?
Yes, because what'll happen, just using that example of, a tree falling on someone's personal, item, and then, Park and Rec has to get involved and they take their pictures or whatever. It goes to it goes to the city the city clerk's office, and then court counsel gets involved. And once court counsel gets involved, you hear nothing. And then you get phone numbers and they call and call and call and still nothing. I know of someone who's been waiting well over a year to get their car fixed, to get reimbursed because it was obviously identified that it was a city issue. And so I bring this up tonight because this is these are the small things that you might not hear of. And we just need to know what this system is, who's supposed to pick up the phone, and how is your office addressing these small things? Because the big things always get looked at. It's these little things that tend to fall off the radar. And as alders, we need to be able to provide guidance when constituents come to us.
All right, well, Rod, do you want to address that? I can tell you that when the cases come in from city town clerk where somebody files their claim, Pam Papalizio, who's one of our paralegals in the office, generally does the investigation. And at the end of the investigation, there's a decision made as to whether the claim is going to be accepted and paid or denied. And if it's accepted and paid, we go through the compromise claim. There's a write-up and I sign off on it. And the check should be processed then through the controller's office. So if there's a problem, there's a couple things that I have found is that for some reason, sometimes city emails wind up in people's spam boxes for some reason. So that sometimes happens. But if there is a problem of a constituent of yours who's been waiting and hasn't heard anything, just have them email me. Because I do get emails about these things from time to time. And so what happens with me is that I then forward it on to Pam. Rod supervises her. And we have found one claimant was trying to call. Pam would try to call back, and because they didn't recognize her number, they wouldn't take the call. She got kind of into this, sort of circular. They didn't give the correct email address. They were looking in their other email. So we've had some communication issues, but I'm more than happy to respond. And I guess those things. So just have them email me directly if you have an issue.
I think one of the problems here is that there's no system, right? You say that your paralegal person deals with these small things, and what is her timeline? So she gets it. What she has a year, she has 30 months, she has 6 months, 30 days, 6 months. What is her process? Because I think that's really what it is. Because you shouldn't have to, have to deal with the fact that a tree fell on somebody's car.
I'm happy to deal with it because it's part of the job. I'm not aware that there's any real delay in actually conducting the investigation. In my experience, the delay has been usually from the decision that's been made on the claim, somehow communicating that to the claimant.
Okay. Well, so not to belabor this, but I know that I'm not the only alder that gets these type of complaints. And when we have these, this is the time, follow the money. This is the time when you can talk to the people that make these decisions and can give you clarity. So, until you all get some type of system, I guess I'll be telling people to call our court counsel about the tree falling on their car and stuff like that. Okay.
Well, if there's issues, I've responded to delayed releases for real estate transactions or transactions through LCI, and I'm happy to forward them on and make sure that people get a response. But my understanding is that these things get investigated in a timely manner. I'm not aware of any real delay generally in these things. So like I said, the delay is generally between the end of the investigation and getting the information to the claimant.
Okay.
But if they would email me, email is the best, to be honest with you, because it gives me a record and it gives me something to forward on, and And I tell people to contact me if they don't hear anything in a few days or a week or whatever. So I'm more than happy to follow up on it because it's part of the job. And if I see from more people contacting me that it's an issue, then, we'll take a closer look at it.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Righty, thank you, Alder Morrison. Moving right along, Alder Walker Myers, any question?
My question was answered throughout the presentation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty, thank you, ma'am. Alder Festa?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a couple of questions in regard to some of the items in the budget, particularly, in the mission and the overview statement in section 3-7, it says work closely with economic development to increase tax base as quickly as possible. Does this mean that you're also going to work with economic development in deferral payments? What exactly are you working on with economic development?
Our work with economic development is generally related to contracts and related to supporting sometime outside counsel in some of the large development projects like Downtown Crossing and some of the litigation around those things. So that's what we're more of a support service for what economic development is doing.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I wasn't sure if it also involved some of the contracts with developers for tax deferral, which I've mentioned quite a bit this evening.
Well, economic development has Attorney John Ward works with Mike Piscatelli in economic development. So I imagine a lot of those contracting matters are handled by him.
Okay, thank you. And also, how is your department improving efficiencies in labor and employment litigation? That was also an item there.
Yes, we have taken on the defense of a number of CHRO cases recently, rather than refer them to outside counsel. The vacancy that Mike Wallach left when he retired, unfortunately, has kept us from doing probably as much of that as we would like because all the other litigation attorneys had to cover the cases that he had. And as I said, we're trying to get more information centralized and using Michelle Dupre as the deputy for that in order to put ourselves in a better position to defend claims that arise from some of these early problems.
Okay. There's also, it looks like, I think it's on page 3-14, there were 3 losses. What were the costs to those 3 losses? And what about settlements? Oh, you actually covered settlements, I think, back in the beginning of this.
Yeah, yes, I did. And losses were verdicts against us. Is that, Rod, do you?
Yeah, what type of cases?
I don't have the budget, the whole budget right in front of me, so.
I don't have it in front of me either, and I'm trying to think specifically what they were. Is this during the most recent fiscal year?
It's whatever you guys have in the budget book for the 2021 budget.
Boy.
Alder Festa, are you pointing to a budget line that's about anticipated judgments that would have to be budgeted for? Because a judgment.
No, there were 3 losses.
Be the current fiscal year, right?
There were 3 losses. And I'm just curious as what that cost was to us. I mean, it's in the budget book.
So you're looking at it like the current fiscal year as is listed in the budget.
I'm sorry, Alder Festa, what page is it? I can bring it up.
I
So,
think, I have here
Attorney King.
3-14.
Excuse me, Ron and Pat, those were losses after trial. And in order to obtain that figure, we would have to look in our case database. If we could get back to you.
Yeah, sure. Through Madam Chair, we can request that information.
Okay.
Yes.
Happy to
And so
provide.
Madam Chair, through you, I'd like to request that info with the losses for the cost to the 3 losses. And also you mentioned that we have a few labor contracts in the works for the fiscal year. Is that correct? Did I understand that correctly?
They're open for, well, they're not currently being negotiated, but we expect to start negotiations.
Okay, and do you know if there are any plans to change some of the options for pension or medical or anything that, you know, costs the city?
I don't know at this
particularly
time.
pensions.
I don't know at this time, and I'm not, Attorney Simpson could address that. I think she would like to be heard on that.
Okay.
You're on mute, Kathleen.
Can you hear me? Yes, we're currently looking at all of costs to the city and looking at proposals for savings and which might work out. We do have 2, we're starting negotiations for 884, local 884, and the nurses contract. We're starting, I don't have the dates in front of me. I believe we're starting it's called bump and runs. We start out with your ground rules in May. And I don't know if that helps you, but yes, the issues of pension, medical, the big cost savings are definitely being looked at and being pursued to see what if any options there might be, if that helps.
Yes, that does help. And I guess we'll look forward to maybe more conversations on that information. So thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, we cannot hear you currently. You may have to adjust your settings. I believe that Alder Furlow is next.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. Alder Furlow, you're up.
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, sir. Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few questions. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for that thorough explanation of who the attorneys are and what they're responsible for. That's a great thing to know. The question that I have is in reference to the case loads. You indicated, Attorney King, that we have 450 active cases. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and I understand that you have 126 new cases. And are those 126 new cases part of the 450 caseload? Or are those additional?
No, those are part of the current cases pending. The 126 were just cases that have been filed in this fiscal year, but they're also included in the pending cases.
Okay, and as you had indicated, and you were sharing the caseload, you indicated 63, 53, 66, and a vacancy of 20. That comes to about 202 cases. I'm a little concerned. Are there many cases that have not been assigned to attorneys and for good cause?
Rod, do you want to address that? I think there's a number that have been assigned to outside counsel.
Some have been assigned to outside counsel. We also are involved in a number of cases that are foreclosure action where the city is a party because we have a lien or something else. And so those aren't going to be reflected in the cases that were totaled up because those are handled by a different attorney, Michael Pinto, in the office who does LCI's work. So I suspect that that's where a lot of those are.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
All righty.
Attorney Simpson, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Evelyn Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Moving right along to Alder Ron Hurt. Do you have questions?
Madam Chair, I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
All righty. And Alder Charles Decker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. I also, though, appreciate the org chart and the walking through everyone's responsibilities. You know, in my as the chair of the legislation committee, I'm pretty familiar with the work that your office does, but it's also good just to have sort of delineated, you know, who has what on their plate. So thank you for that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Decker. Thank you, Corporation Counsel, the whole group, for your presentation and also your dedication and hard work to our city. We are grateful for your service. Thank you all.
All right. Thank you all for your time.
All righty, moving right along. Next on our list is the Fair Rent Commission.
Ms. Johnson, when you're ready, we'll take your name, address for the record, please, sir.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. My name is Otis Johnson, Jr. I am the Executive Director of the Fair Rent Commission, and I reside at 1172 Chapel Street here in the city of New Haven.
And Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. So again, I threw up Mr. Johnson's slide for fair rent. This is a two-man department within the city, with Mr. Johnson being the executive director, and a few budget cycles ago, giving Mr. Johnson some help for the volume of work that he was seeing prior to COVID, with a field representative. As you can see from the FY 2021 budget, Board of Alder approved budget to the FY 22 mayor's budget, there are no changes. What we did do was reduce other contractual services and increase a uniform line for Mr. Johnson's staffing, so that way similar to what LCI has. So fair rent is identifiable when they are out in the field as City of New Haven staff representing that department. So what I will do is turn it over to Mr. Johnson for anything else he would like to add.
Thank you, Mr. Gormley. I will add, since you discussed the field representative's position, it has been very a great addition to the commission. That staff person is very invigorating and has participated in the neighborhood walkthroughs, which was a benefit to the staff person in identifying just the important need that we serve in the city in addressing the quality of affordable housing in the city of New Haven. As most of you know, we take complaints based on rent increases and the conditions of housing in the city of New Haven. And we work along with LCI in that degree where they do the inspections, but being out there in the field is very important. I had to laugh when my staff person, the field representative, Denise Doman, went out on her first walk through the neighborhood. She was working with the mayor, was out walking with the mayor, and the two of them came back and had developed a great relationship to the point where she has at one point introduced an initiative and went over my head and went straight to the mayor. So I think she has really joined herself with this job and has been a great asset. I can report to you that during the pandemic and COVID-19, obviously with our title Fair Rent Commission, we have gotten a lot of calls during the rental freeze from both tenants and landlords. And it has been very interesting, the calls I have received. And in particular, since we do with rent and rent cost, I've have received a number of inquiries from both tenants and landlords, tenants who want to maintain their housing, but landlords, particularly the smaller landlords, do not have the resources when there is a rent freeze. And so folks say, well, you know, I like to make repairs to my apartment. The landlord's not doing it. So I have been spending the last year counseling folks on how to navigate this, this situation that we have right now, where some housing stock may be deteriorating. And I tell folks, well, if you have to talk to your landlord, communication is very important. They talk about making repairs. How do I pay for them? I advise folks, if you do have expenditures on your housing, that you maintain those receipts. Because once we open up, I am certain the commission is going to receive some inquiries regarding repairs, rents, and things of that sort. And so we are in a position, based on our experience, to address these concerns with tenants. I've also gotten calls from landlords about the freeze. I have informed them that when state and federal monies do come forward, when this is over, that money will not go to tenants, it will go directly to landlords. So it has eased their anxieties about the rental housing business. So basically, that's what we've been doing. We have been serving both parties in regards to their affordable housing in the city of New Haven. Thank you.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Gormany. At this time, I will start the questioning with Alder Marchand, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Mr. Johnson for the words he just offered us. He gave us a very useful summary, brief summary of how the pandemic has changed the dynamic of the rental housing market and how he and his department have had to adjust. I think this is fertile grounds for further discussion, probably at some workshop related to the broader issue of affordable housing. I just want to recognize the important function that your office plays, Mr. Johnson. I'm glad that we were able to support the creation of additional positions. I'm glad that you've seen that person make a difference to the mission of your organization. And I have a lot of things I would like to discover about this, but given the hour, and given that this is just about the budget, which is flat, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. And moving on to Alder Ernie Santiago. Any questions from the Fair Rent Commission?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
All righty. Alder DeCola?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Morrison?
No questions, Madam Chair.
All righty. Alder Walker Myers?
No questions at this time, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Alder Festa?
No questions, Madam Chair. Questions were answered during the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Alder Furlow?
No questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez?
At this time, no questions, but I just want to say thank you to Mr. Otis Johnson, because the mediation that Fair Rent provides to our tenants and landlords is tremendously helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All righty, moving right along. Alder Hurt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
All righty, and Alder Charles Decker?
No questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty. Mr. Johnson, thank you very much for your time this evening and your service, sir.
Thank you.
All righty. Moving right along to the Finance Department.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. Let me just throw this right up. All right, so I prepared a PowerPoint for the finance department. I know it's a late hour, so I'm going to try to go through the highlights in detail. The finance department deals with a lot of major areas such as utilities, employee benefits, taxes, and other major areas for the city of New Haven. The first slide is really just an overview of the finance budget, which is $18.9 million all in. So that's our general fund budget, looking in the Forward Together budget, our special funds budget, and our capital projects budget. So all in, we're looking at about $18.9 million for fiscal year 21-22. Moving over to the capital budget, one of the responsibilities of the Office of Management and Budget is to work with the Department of Finance and other coordinators and department heads on preparing the mayor's capital improvement budget. So as you can see, one of the analysis that we've talked about over the last few years is looking at how much the city actually borrows for capital projects and fitting it within a debt limit within general fund, because the money that you borrowed is the money that you bond for capital projects is paid back through the general fund by debt service. So the less you borrow, the less you'll pay back over future years. So what this chart shows is that we have actually gone down in bonding, and we started that trend basically in fiscal year 16-17, where we borrowed $46.1 million in city bonding. Fiscal year 18-19 does include 2 one-time projects, so that's why that number's a little higher, but the overall departmental asks were around $41 million. In fiscal year 19-20, we started the 2-year cycle, which was $70.7 million, and looking and working with Mayor Elicker and all the coordinators and department heads, we lowered that by $10.7 million to get down to a number that we thought was reasonable and looking in at future years. So again, the reason we have this slide is one of the functions of Office of Management and Budget is to monitor and look at capital projects for the city and the Board of Education. As far as the finance department as a whole, this slide shows you the overall capital projects for the Department of Finance, which includes information and technology. As we know, especially during this pandemic, how important information and technology was. So as you can see, we maintain a lot of the funding, fitting it within the mayor's priorities of lowering the capital budget. So this capital budget still maintains our technology infrastructure while lowering the allocation over the future years. One of the items I put on this chart is the rolling stock, which falls under OMB and the CAO. 2 years ago, we developed a rolling stock committee to look at the purchase of vehicles. So that way we know what departments are purchasing, what type of vehicles. And as the city goes more towards green initiatives and looks at sustainability, having a rolling stock committee to evaluate the purchases of departments, which includes the Board of Ed, has been very helpful. We have been able to streamline our fleet, make sure we're purchasing the same type of vehicles. And how that helps is because if we need to do repairs or whatever the case is, departments are buying the same type of vehicles. So if you have an unusable vehicle, it may be used for parts for another vehicle in a department. One of the things that we've also looked at is, again, like I mentioned, sustainability. We actually purchased 2 Nissan Leaf vehicles, which are electric cars. So we purchased one that our engineer, Giovanni Zinn, uses. The other one is in the mayor's office as well, but we're also looking at sustainability. So we also have some funds left over from the 19-20 year, which enabled us to sort of cut that allocation. So we're being very proactive in what we're buying, our fleet, and making sure we are also able to still restock our public safety side as well. which is police and fire. Again, the second part is our technology infrastructure. One of the big items that you'll see here is we did essentially double our digitization, which you'll hear about in a few different departments. As we go into a digital world, we need documents more accessible. And I think the pandemic definitely opened our eyes to what we really need to digitize and just different processes. So I think we're also starting that process. And what that helps us do is less paper, less printing, less everything else that we actually have to do by having digitized records and scanning more items. The technology department consists of network upgrades, softwares. We also do police and fire and library and TTMP. Again, we like to have our IT department sort of overseeing the citywide structure of IT. Moving on to the general fund side. Again, we talked about the grand list growth, which was about 87.9 million. One of the reasons I wanted to add this slide is, again, we're talking really about the Forward Together budget as the primary budget for the mayor. I know everyone's, how are you so sure on tiered piloting that that money is coming in? How are you sure, you know, why did you add that into the budget? I think as you've seen through the news and everything else, tiered piloting, the bill was signed by the governor. Moody's rating agency actually came out with a great article on how this is a credit positive scenario for the state and for other cities to fund pilot. We continue to talk to our state delegation, which, you know, all the indications are that the tiered piloting will be funded and everything else. And again, with that Moody's article coming out, we had some of the state legislators, not necessarily in New Haven, but also mentioned in that article as well how positive this is for New Haven. So again, that's one of the reasons that we continue to endorse the Forward Together budget, is because all indications are that that tiered pilot will be funded going into the fiscal year. So again, focusing in on the Forward Together budget, that leaves the mill rate at 43.88, the current mill rate that we're at. And I think that's a positive for the taxpayer in New Haven, because again, as we looked at the exempt grand list during the assessor's presentation, that's a large portion. And, you know, having 40% only taxable has the burden really fall on the taxpayers when we have tax exempt institutions that we're not being funded for. So tier piloting will help us maintain the mill rate at 43.88 going into next fiscal year. I mentioned in the overview, but the federal stimulus is falling under finance and economic development. Mike Piscatelli is doing a lot of work on that, but you know, we're looking at Treasury still hasn't given us a lot of guidance on the federal stimulus and what it can be used for. Again, I mentioned in the overview, one of the things that they are very specific for is it can't be used for like pension costs, pension increases, or to reduce the tax rate. So they are very specific on those particular types of uses for this funding. So, I'm sorry, this sheet just shows, the next slide just shows, again, focusing in on the Forward Together budget, what the mill rate would be and the current increase in the budget, which would be about $38.2 million over fiscal year 21. This is just a history of the mill rate since fiscal year 2007. And again, this keeps the mill rate flat in the Forward Together budget based on our revenue analysis. Looking at the expenditure side, this is just a chart of positions, and I know this says crisis budget, but this is, there was only a part-time position elimination in the crisis budget versus the Forward Together budget. So again, this is a full-time count, which doesn't really change between each budget. As you can see, we're at 59 positions in finance, which again, this is general fund, which also includes our IT department. They're part of finance as well. The reason the difference between 2021 and 2022, if you remember mid-year, we took a IT position and we converted that into 2 positions basically. So that's why the count is different on the FTE between 2021 and 2022. And I think that's working out for us so far. Again, the pandemic has really shown the need of IT, and we really need all hands on deck related to IT and just the city's overall IT infrastructure. Departmental changes. And I apologize, Madam Chair, but I want to ask you a question in mid-presentation. As far as I know, can I combine items on the agenda? It said Finance Department and Finance Other. This presentation goes into Finance Other, so I don't know if you want me to stop there or just continue.
Why don't you just continue?
Okay. All right, so some of the departmental changes in the Finance Department, IT maintenance contracts, which is something that comes up every year. Basically, our IT maintenance contracts are our annual contracts for our software. So like our financial system, our network stuff, police and library maintenance costs, software. Again, we do an estimated increase based on the trend that we see. Sometimes we're exact, sometimes it's lower, sometimes it's higher. A lot of these contracts are on a fiscal year basis, but we don't get the actual bill until like June. And so by then we would actually know what the increase is. So we kind of estimate what the increase is. In the Forward Together budget, we increased it by $500,000 based on the spend that we see this fiscal year. To keep in transparency, we moved the government center heating and cooling in the fuel cell. One of the things that I think was very beneficial for finance that the board did in conjunction with the mayor's proposal was create a central utilities account, which basically listed out per department what the utility costs are. These are 2 items that should really have been in the central utilities area because it deals with electricity, heating and cooling in other areas. So we moved that out of finance into central utilities. On this central utility side, we did increase that based on what we've seen pre-COVID and after COVID. It was kind of a hard mixture because, as you know, we're teleworking, so we're not using as much electricity costs, but if we have employees come back, there's going to be more usage. So we kind of looked at a 4-year average, 3 years pre-COVID and then where we're at COVID, and did increase some of the utility costs in central services for finance. We added internet and communication. Again, that goes into central utilities. That's not new. So let me repeat that, that's not new, but those were budgeted in the departments earlier on. Internet and communications is really like the services that we have for Comcast at the senior centers, 720 Edgewood, we have different services. So that's what that means with internet and communication. And one of the other things that I'm excited about, honestly, is in central utilities is the utility audit services. So one of the things that we did was we went out for RFP, myself and the previous controller, for the city for utility costs, because to be honest, again, as we mentioned throughout tonight on staffing, finance is at a staffing low right now, and it's very hard for us to do utility audits. And we just don't have the expertise to do it. And the engineering department is stretched thin as well. One of the things that we did was an RFP on utilities to have them look at our utility bills, so UI, Frontier, other services. And they actually came back and we actually got refund checks because they found billing errors in other services for the city of New Haven. So I can tell you that $100,000 is actually well worth its cost because you know, right now we looked at UI, and again, this is over like a 6 or 7 year period, but we got a refund of like $330,000 to the city just because of sales tax and other different tax. So having someone actually look at these utilities on a quarterly basis for the city of New Haven would be a great thing, so that doesn't end up happening in the future. One of the things that we also deal with is non-public transportation. So that did increase in the budget, but that's based on the transportation contract for the Board of Education. So there's a 3% increase in that contract. So again, on our side, we budget non-public schools, which is like private schools and I'm sorry, I forgot the other word, but it's private, it's non-public school students, and by law, the city and Board of Ed has to provide those transportation costs. Contract reserve is budgeted for $3.1 million, which is about the same as this year. You heard in Corp Council, we do have a number of contracts that are up at the moment that will go into next fiscal year. So we left that funding the same going into fiscal year 22. Various organizations, which are the organizations that we contribute to, such as New Haven Works, Family Justice Center, Boys and Girls Club, all those contributions have remained the same. You heard someone testify about the Democracy Fund. We did add the Democracy Fund in the Forward Together budget. It is at $250,000, and working with that board and primarily Sergio and looking at an adequate funding ratio for the Democracy Fund, especially coming up in the upcoming mayoral election. So every other organization was held flat, and the Democracy Fund was added. Debt service is based on the borrowing schedule. Again, that $60 million is taken into account for the next 2 years, along with all our other debt service. So that increased by a little bit over $3 million going into fiscal year 22 versus fiscal year 21. Expenditure reserve, we did lower from fiscal year 21, was budgeted at $4 million. In the Forward Together budget, we did leave a cushion in there of about $1 million. And again, we left that cushion in there because we'll get into it with the CAO department, but we did increase the police and fire, primarily overtime accounts, to funding levels that we've seen in the last few years regarding overtime. And as we continue to monitor COVID and different federal funds become available for the use of COVID and the vaccine, that would actually lower the burden on the operating fund. So again, in the Forward Together budget, we did lower that from $4 million to $1 million. Pensions. Pensions, we worked with the pension boards and the actuarials. We did end up lowering the rate of return from 7.75 to 7.25% for the pensions. The original recommendation was to go from 7.75 to 7%. But again, as we talked about and was reported in different media outlets, you know, as you go down in the rate of return, that increases the employer's contribution. So what we did was we worked with the actuaries and the pension boards to come to an adequate level of funding, knowing that we did have to reduce that rate of return. That 7.75% was not sustainable going into the next few years as far as the rate of return. So working with the actuaries after they made the initial recommendation of 7%, we came to a baseline of 7.25%. The Forward Together budget also includes additional funding to the pensions. I know I talked about it a little bit at the overview, but we did have a baseline, which was of the ADEC payment, which is what the crisis budget was based on. So that is the baseline in the crisis budget, and that is making 100% of the ADEC. We did end up in the Forward Together budget funding more than what the actuaries recommended at the 7.25% for the pensions. Our self-insurance account, which is our general insurance liability. So those are our insurance policies. Again, that's like our IT maintenance agreements where, you know, we try to estimate what our insurance policies are, but the market will really dictate the increase. So based on the spending that we're seeing in fiscal year 21, we increased it by $500,000 going into fiscal year 22. In the Forward Together budget for medical, we did increase the medical by 2.5 million. And we've talked about this during Finance Committee meetings about medical is going to go up at some point. You know, the pandemic has sort of slowed that down. We're starting to see a little bit of that trend creep up if you look at the monthly reports on the medical side. So again, we did increase that by 2.5 million, but again, medical is one of those items that is very hard to budget for. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to see in any year. While we're having a great year in workers' comp, you know, we did increase that as well. You know, we did have more employees teleworking. We're still revamping and really aggressively looking at workers' comp. You see that kind of reflected in the monthly reports, but we did want to have a contingency also related to workers' comp. So we did end up increasing that by about $1 million in the Forward Together budget. This is just a chart that you can see on how much the ADEC payment has gone up since 2004 related to pension costs. As you can see, in 2004, we were at 10.4 million and for PNF and 6.7 million for SURF, and we're currently at 26.7 million for SURF and 53.09 for PNF. And this is just also the medical benefits general fund contribution. So again, we have a separate fund for medical benefits, but the general fund, along with employee cost sharing, along with grants and everything else, contributes to that fund. But again, this is just a chart from 2004 to fiscal year 22 mayor's proposed budget. So with that, that is the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Wow, that was a lot of information, Mr. Gormany. Alder Marchand, are you ready?
I am, Madam Chair. I echo your comment. There's a lot in here, including some big things, pensions, healthcare, service. I think I understand what is put before us, and so I'll have more to say during deliberations on those things. I don't actually understand the presentation. I guess I'll ask a quick clarifying question about the vacancy saving. I mean, clearly the so-called crisis budget called for a much larger vacancy saving. I guess you accomplished that by not filling open positions, correct?
So the difference is in the crisis budget, in the Forward Together budget, we have a smaller amount of about 540,000, something around that number. And you are correct, Alder Marchand, that number is usually achieved because what we'll talk about more during the HR presentation is how we fill positions, civil service and testing. That can take a while. It's not like when someone retires, we really fill that position 2 weeks later, right? So we take into account the attrition, that's called attrition, with those vacancies. In the crisis budget, that 2.6 million is really a combination of a lot of things. So that's a combination of RIF, which stands for reduction in force, which is accomplished through layoffs or early retirement packages and not filling those positions, and other measures that the city would take during the crisis budget. But yes, there's a vast difference between those two sections in the budget.
And of course, we'd be careful about vacancies in our public safety departments where what we find out is that we end up getting whacked with large overtime bills because there aren't enough people to cover the mandatory minimum staffing levels that we need.
Correct, Alder
That's not true for
Marchand.
every department. Some departments, the people aren't filled and the services aren't rendered, but you can't do that in the public safety department.
Correct, and I want to point out in the public safety departments, we also, within the police and fire department, also already take into account attrition separately into their budgets, so.
Okay, thank you. I would just say on the record that I am a little concerned about the medical, although we put out that slide, it did something unusual, right? There's a few years where it went down, which is not typically what you see in healthcare, but we had, after many, many years of large trend from year to year, we've had 2 years that have been pretty good. But I worry about the chickens coming home roost, if that's the right expression. A lot of care being delayed, and I just worry that we're going to see a large increase in utilization on the backside of this pandemic. Also, I worry about a higher incidence of cost claims for people with chronic health conditions who've not been managing conditions and end up getting really sick. So I think it's prudent to put more money in there, just to plan for it to go up. And if, of course, it doesn't, that's money that's available for transfers to other purposes. So I think for now, Madam Chair, I'm going to ponder the numbers and think about the assumptions behind them. Oh, I guess one final question, which is why did the investment advisors push such a large reduction in the rate of return? They thinking about the economy going down and that affecting the portfolios of those pensions, because actually the socket has been performing really well.
Yeah, I think it's really just looking at the baseline overall, Alder Marchand. I think looking at pensions and where everyone else is at as far as the rate of return, getting to that baseline. Again, we worked with the pensions to get it down, but I think there's still a lot of work to do. I think what we need to look at from the rate of return side is really incrementally decreasing that rate of return, because again, what we end up doing are these large drops, which sort of cost a lot of money to do. And I think, we should really look at getting down and working with the pensions to 7% like they recommended in the next few years, or lower than that. I believe the state is at like 6.90, along with the other few cities and towns that are below 7. So again, I think their recommendation was really looking at the baseline of, a pension cost, but from a dollar and cent standpoint, just that big of a drop is very hard for the city to handle at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gorman. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder Marchand. Alder Ernie Santiago.
No questions. Thank you.
All righty, Alder DeCola.
No questions at this time.
Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Madam Chair.
Alder Walker Myers.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Gormley, for your presentation. It was a lot of information, but it was very detailed and very clear to me. But I do have a question in regards to the pensions and the rate of return. And I know we'll touch more on this in the pension task force meetings that's going to be reconvened. But you already alluded to possibly the city going down lower than the 7% rate of return that they're expecting us to reach. Has the city actually been thinking about a plan over the next course, 5 years, 4 years, or 3 years, how they can actually bring the rate of return down lower than what the actuaries actually are recommending to us?
No, that's a great question, President Walker Myers. And I think that's kind of where I was going with the answer with Alder Marchand is I think what we realized out of these drops, out of lowering the rate of return in this budget cycle, and how the actuaries actually do it, like the mortality tables, COLA adjustments, cost of living other adjustments that they have when they actually calculate this stuff. I think the pension board, that's one of the things that I think both pension boards want to look at is, again, like I said, incrementally lowering the rate of return over the next, 5 to 6 years, whether it's, we get the valuations done every 2 years. So maybe you lower it 0.25%, every 2 years or whatever the case is. But I think this budget cycle kind of brought about that conversation. And I look forward to working on the pension task force with everybody to further look at those conversations. But I think it would be great to look at that because, again, I think what we've seen is we do these large drops and then we find ourselves in budget cycles like this, where it's like from a dollar and cents point, such a large increase in the budget.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's really important that we take the time to have these conversations. So I look forward to working with everyone on the pension task force as well. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Festa, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While we're on the topic of pension task force, have all the appointments been made to that task force?
I would have to check with Mr. Lucas on that, to be honest, Alder Festa. I am new to the pension task force, so I know appointments were being done for the pension task force. I'm not sure if every appointment has been made, but we can certainly look into that.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. Thank you. And maybe also who is on it. Thanks. Can you just clarify how much higher the pension payments would be at 7%?
Sure. So when I looked at the in recalculating and looking at some numbers with the actuaries to get down to 7.25%, if we did go down to about 7%, it looks like it would add on about another $7 million combined for police and fire. But I will, through the chair, also double check that number. I'm looking at an valuation from about a month and a half ago. I just want to make sure that's my current valuation.
Okay, yeah, if you could, thank you. I appreciate it. Also, regarding pension, and you may have answered this with Alder Marchand, but my brain is on overdrive and it's late. Are we, the performance of the pensions, are we performing as well as the market or like the market? And what are we doing to compensate in case the market somewhat rebalances itself? Because that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Alder Festa. I think right now both funds are performing pretty well. We have the monthly pension meetings where both boards investors present. I will tell you on page 1-20 and 1-21 of the budget, I did publish the rate of returns for the last few years as far as the pension fund performance, but right now I think the pension funds are holding steady from a cash standpoint as far as being able to maintain their monthly obligations. So I think with any fund, COVID has sort of put a hit in the rate of returns, nationwide as far as pension returns, but right now, we still have enough to maintain cash flow and everything else in both pension funds on a monthly basis.
Okay, and are we prepared for any unknowns? Like the market is more than likely going to change. And I know, folks who have personal accounts are already looking to switch things around.
Yeah, that's probably a longer answer than for this meeting and tonight, but the short version is yes, our investment advisors do make contingency plans and try to take into account every basic scenario based on market conditions.
Okay, I appreciate that. Also, I'm just going to back up a little. When you mentioned that info adding 7 million combined for police and fires, that's SURF as well?
Yes, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear, but that's SURF and police and fire. So
okay.
Both pensions.
Okay, perfect. And just if there were no refinancings, when would our current debt payments peak on an annual basis?
Well, not to hold up tonight, but through Madam Chair, I can get you that information. I would have to log on to my work computer to sort of get that information. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, that'll be helpful. And just as just one additional thing, can you, and this is not regarding what we were just talking about, but can you just explain to everyone what are the main drivers of the deficit in both the crisis budget and the together budget? Because we know they're the same. So there are key influencers that drive the deficit that we can control and some that we can't. Can you just give us like a quick rundown of what those drivers are?
Well, I think what you see, Alder Festa, as far as like a quick rundown, is the difference between the crisis budget and the Forward Together budget. I mean, the main drivers were really pension and certain revenue adjustments like parking meters, parking receipts. We had a reimbursement from the state for the last few years. That was $1 million loss. Building permits obviously had to go down, which you'll hear about tomorrow. So it was really just revenue loss versus certain fixed costs increase, with the debt service at $3 million. Obviously, the biggest one being pension, which in this budget I believe is like 14 to 15 million. In the Forward Together budget. So again, I think what you've seen in healthcare and workers' comp and a few others. So you've seen really fixed costs for the city go up and revenue decline, which is what really made up the beginning deficit. And then again, to address that deficit, we're looking at tiered piloting in the Forward Together budget, which is, again, what we're focusing on, and is very likely from all our indications what's going to come to play with the city. And again, as I mentioned, Moody's and I know other rating agencies are looking at it and find it as a credit positive item. The only way in the crisis budget to sort of offset some of that was, which is really the backup budget, were cuts in a tax increase. I mean, that's the most plain way I could put it. But again, we're all focused on the Forward Together budget as a positive budget that's going to come to fruition within this budget cycle.
All righty. Alder Festa, that was your last question.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All righty.
Madam Chair, I think we just want to clarify that Alder Festa was asking for information about the debt payment schedule through you. Is that correct, Alder Festa?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And Mr. Gormany, I'll just email you the additional questions.
Alder Festa, you should make sure that any questions you have, Mr. Gormany, are also copied to Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Noted. Thank you.
All righty. Moving right along to Alder Furlow. You're next on the queue, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The good thing about being almost last is most of the questions are always answered. And so my preliminary questions are answered. I'm sure I'll have more as we continue. Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Gormany, for such a thorough presentation.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Alder Evelyn Rodriguez, any questions, ma'am?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Gormley.
Alder
Thank
Hurt.
you, Alder Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions this time, and I want to thank Mr. Gormley for a thorough presentation.
All righty. Last but not least, Alder Decker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While the majority leader might be nearly last, I am last each time. So I have no questions. Thank you.
Pardon me. All righty, Mr. Gormley. Thank you so much for your effort and hard work, man. You've stayed with us the whole night. I told you this was.
We still have one more, Madam Chair.
Yes, we want Mr. Lucas to join us
Oh, wow.
and talk about OLS.
Office of Legislative Services, the last item on the agenda for the workshop.
All right, Michael Gormley, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut.
Al Lucas, 66 Harbor Close, New Haven, Connecticut.
And I will bring up Mr. Lucas's, but we really do not have any change between FY21 and FY22. We did have a $15,000 reduction in other contractual services, which was based on the cut from this year's budget, the $2 million that was approved in the Board of Alders budget for this year citywide. So that is really the only change in Mr. Luke in the legislative services budget. I don't know if Mr. Lucas has anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Gormley. Yeah, as they know, and thank you, members of the Board of Alders and especially members of the Finance Committee. And there is one additional change that we'll have to make in the budget in terms of a personnel title, where we move the senior legislative assistant to a legislative assistant, which will give us a significant cost savings for the same work being done. So we'll do that. That did occur. The board approved that after the budget was submitted. So the old title still exists in the current documentation, but will need to be adjusted in the final budget document.
Mr. Lucas, I'm sorry, I believe, and I will double check, we did do that as a preliminary already.
That would be great.
Budget.
That would be wonderful. So that being said, and to not be cruel, as Alder Decker likes to say, to not be cruel to the committee, I will again, first thank the Board of Alders. It's been a tough year for everybody, and especially members of this board. Obviously, we've had several staff members that have had serious losses, as many of us did, and they have continued to produce and work on behalf of the board. So I do want to get that on the record and thank our staff for that. And obviously, we've had two members who have retired in the last year, and after many, many, many years of service to the city, and we want to thank them on the record for that as well. But that being said, I will yield to the chair so that the rest of the committee can do what they do.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. And with that, we'll start with the questions, starting with Alder Marchand.
Madam Chair, I thank Mr. Lucas for able leadership of this department, and I have no questions at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Alder Ernie Santiago, any questions?
No questions. Thank you very much.
Alder DeCola? Alder DeCola, are you still with us? We'll move on until he returns. Alder Morrison?
No questions, but I do want to thank Mr. Lucas for all the work that he has done in holding all of us together over this last year in doing his job plus two other jobs because of the openings that we've had. and we continue to produce, as he said, but through him and the members of his office. And so I just wanted to go on record and saying thank you to the Office of Legislative Services. And that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, ma'am. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to repeat what everybody else said. No questions. Thank you.
All righty. Alder Festa.
No questions, Madam Chair. Just a big thank you to the Office of Legislative Services and to Mr. Lucas. And I know he's working hard to fill those positions. So thank you for all of your efforts and for facing many of the challenges this past year.
Yes, indeed. Alder Furlow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions. I think we should just set Mr. Lucas's retirement date for when he coaches about 85 years old. That sounds about right.
Oh, I'm with that. All righty. Alder Evelyn Rodriguez.
No questions, Madam Chair. I just like to say again, thank you to Mr. Lucas and to the entire staff there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, ma'am. Alder Hurt. Alder Ron Hurt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions, but a big thank you. I echo everything that my colleagues have stated on tonight. Thank you, Mr. Lucas.
All righty. And Alder Decker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no questions and echo my colleagues' gratitude to Mr. Lucas and his whole office. Thank you.
Mr. Lucas, thank you so very much, as usual, for what you do for all of us, all the colleagues on the board. You support us all, and we couldn't work without you. So let me just say thank you from myself, as well as the rest of the Board of Alders. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. All righty. Gentlemen.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I wonder if I might make a quick announcement before we adjourn.
Yes, go right ahead.
I just want to remind colleagues and everybody who's on this call that we have our next workshop tomorrow, starting at 6. There's no public hearing, so we'll go straight into the departmental workshop. We've had requests from city staff to change the arrangement of the departments just a little bit so that they're more organized in a certain way. So for example, the Community Services Administration is an umbrella that encompasses a number of different departments, and they like to kick off their presentation by having the CS Administration give an overview, talk about its own office, and then move on to the other departments underneath that, owned by Youth Services, Health Department, Elderly Services. Similarly, the Economic Development Administration will be before us tomorrow. Mr. Piselli would like to kick off with an overview, talk about the central office for EA, and then bring on the other departments, the Bill Department, LCI, TTP, Commission on Equal Opportunity, City Plan. And so that's a little bit different sequence than what is a published agenda, but I think it makes sense to group all the departments underneath the coordinators and to give the coordinators an opportunity to open up each section with an overview of their overall activity. And that's tomorrow. And we look forward to seeing people back on Zoom on Wednesday, learning more about our DNIS budget. Thank you, Madam.
All righty. All right. And with that, the lateness of the hour, it's now 10:53. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on adjourning?
Nope.
All right, Alder Marchand, are you in favor?
Yes.
Alder Ernie Santiago?
Yes.
Alder DeCola? Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Walker Myers?
Yes.
Alder Fester?
Yes.
Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Evelyn Rodriguez?
Yes.
Alder Ron Hurt?
Yes.
And Alder Charles Decker.
Yes.
All right, with that being said, thank you all for your patience and hard work tonight. We are adjourned. We see everybody tomorrow. Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night. Good night, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all. Good night.
Good night.
Whew.